Science and technology and innovation, these are indispensable in the modern economy, in the modern world.
We held a meeting at the MSI, and we resolved among about 6 to 8 of us, local members, first to form PASA Philippines so that we could continue to host meetings here, but also to go on a massive campaign to try to get support from the national government through the legislative and executive branches to invest more in science and technology. So it started with a white paper, a position paper that we co-authored among 6 of us, namely Ernie Pernia, Cesar Saloma, Rodora Asansa, Toby Diary of Ateneo, and Aldin Colaba de la Salle, and myself.
So PASE historically, in the past 10, 20 years for sure, have been collaborating with our counterparts here in the Philippines at various universities. And a lot of these interactions probably started as peer-to-peer. But thankfully, we have the Department of Science and Technology here in the Philippines, and they've come up with some really helpful and very impactful programs that actually enable PASE members that are based in the United States and other parts of the world to actually come here and do extensive research and academic partnerships and collaborations.
Well, I think that one of the good things that PASE is doing is really trying to stay in touch with the researchers and the scientists here in the Philippines. So I think that is one of the good programs that they keep on supporting some of the initiatives of our researchers and scientists here in the country, trying to align also their assistance towards the plans of the Philippine government.
It's very important that the PASE members and scientists based in the Philippines are continuously in contact, so we will know the needs of the Filipinos and opportunities that Filipinos can have to do science with their PASE counterparts. So these interactions, such as the conference that we're holding and the annual conferences that we have.
The Philippines and the scientists there have very unique perspective that adds to discoveries and inventions, advancing in general the field.
These members, because they are part of an academy, it implies that they are productive. So they have publications, they have innovations, they have inventions, patents, and they have, they have an impact on society. Okay, so these are the people who can convince government, invest more in science and technology, and that was really the gist of our paper, our position paper in 2000. And it is Ernie Pernia who said that R&D by nature is expensive and it is a public good. So it is important for the government to take the lead in investing in R&D.
To increase the economic growth potential of the country, we cannot continue to just rely on traditional inputs into production as capital and labor. We also need to develop our expertise in science and technology and innovation so that we can come up with new systems, new ways of doing things.
I think that science, researchers, industry, and even the government is really like an ecosystem of knowledge. So I think it doesn't really matter if you're coming from a private institution or a public institution, such as a state university. I think we all have a role to play to improve the research capabilities and scientific knowledge here in the country. I think it is about time for us to realize that one of our roles as academics, as researchers, as scientists, is to actually contribute to that global body of knowledge.
And the role of this cooperation among these government agencies really is to be able to attract science and technology, global-based companies to set up shop here. And that is really key in terms of developing the science and technology innovation ecosystem in the country.
Particularly because there's that deep desire. And what PASE does and can do more of is to promote this relationship between its members.
We really need to ratchet up the appreciation, the recognition of the importance of science and technology and innovation.
And we are all trying to attain what we call the common good, the greater, higher, long-term good of the Filipino people.
Okay, great. Very interesting. We're very privileged to be with you, sa mga experts natin sa science and technology and engineering. So thank you very much for this initiative. By the way, I'm with our provincial administrator, Joff. I asked him to join us also. So once again, thank you for this initiative and good morning to everyone.
Maraming salamat, Gobet, Governor Abet. I'd like to greet our guests and our participants today. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to PASE Fireside Chat, episode 21, Giving Value to Waste, Upcycling through 3D Printing and Additive Manufacturing. I'm Giselle Concepcion, President of PASE, on behalf of my co-host, PASE board member, CP Carlos Primo David of the UP Institute of Geological Sciences. I'd like to welcome you to this very special chat today. And we have a very, very important lineup of speakers. And we would like to introduce them to you. Starting with our first speaker, who is a dear friend and a woman champion of the environment. This is none other than Maria Antonia Tony Loizaga, who is president of the National Resilience Council. And she is a trustee of many foundations like the Manila Observatory, Zulig Family Foundation, Ateneo de Naga University, Forest Foundation Philippines. And she's also a member of the UN DRR, Disaster Resilience, Science and Technology Advisory Group, and Asia Pacific Science Technology Academia Sinica Advisory Group. And Tony here will be the one to introduce our very special guest today, none other than Bataan Governor Albert Raymond Abet Garcia, whom many of us know for his progressive programs in Bataan. I have known about Governor Abet just as I have been following the work of his father, Governor Tet Garcia. Okay. At this point, I'd like to recognize the presence of some of our special guests and participants. We have with us many PASA members, some NAST academicians, and also some of my special friends from high school, okay, including the sister of Tony, that's Tessie Yula Gomez, and our classmate, who is based in Bataan. This is Celia Teves of Duyan Sinagtala. There are many others in this group today who are very interested in plastics in particular, and the way to give value to them through recycling, through new technologies. In particular, I'd like to recognize the presence of academician Jose Juliano of the National Academy of Science and Technology. There are others who are PASA members and also NAST members in the audience, including past PASA presidents. Okay, too many to mention. So at this point, I'd like to ask Tony to give her presentation. She will introduce Governor Abet, and then afterwards, CP David will introduce our other special speakers, as you can see in the poster. There are 3 more of them. So thank you, everyone, and let's enjoy our fireside chat today on a burning issue. That's why it's a fireside chat. Thanks. So I'm going to stop sharing, and I let Tony share her slides. Yes, Tony?
Thank you very much, Giselle. Can you hear me now?
Loud and clear, yes.
Thank you. First of all, allow me to thank Giselle and CP for this kind invitation. The National Resilience Council, as some of you may know, has been working with Bataan since 2018. We are a fairly young organization, really the result of the convergence between the private sector, some in the science and technology community, some CSOs, and of course, national and local government representatives to really look at resilience from a multidimensional perspective and really resist the inclination to look at disasters as events that we should respond to, but rather as developmental challenges, really issues of exposure and vulnerability to hazards, natural, industrial, biological, over time that have been the result of our development trajectories in the country. So I have the honor to introduce our special guest, Governor Abet Garcia, who has been the leading provincial area as far as the National Resilience Council's work is concerned. And we're very glad to be able to make this link with the Pasig community. So just as many of you may know, and some of you may not, the Governor Abet is the incumbent governor of the province of Bataan. He served 3 terms in Congress and as representative of the 2nd District of Bataan. And his election is well known and re-election is well known. He was previously also a mayor, so he has that experience with him in terms of very local governance that has challenges on its own, as we know, in terms of the vertical decision making that we need to engage in as a local government executive. And principally, and this is one of the most important, I think, highlights of his political background, and Governor Abet, as you know, will be speaking about this a little bit more and the implication for the development of Bataan and the country. He was the author of the Freeport Area of Bataan Act, which I think opened the floodgates, if you will, in terms of the new development trajectory for the province. Our work with Gov really started in 2018, and Gov, I hope you don't mind, we resurrected this poster that you worked on when we first met, and really to determine how we can in fact contribute to the vision of the province. So this is the first articulation that we encountered for the vision for the province, and very clearly Gov stated then that the quality growth in the economy was his priority. He wanted it to be rapid, efficient, but also sustainable and inclusive. And these were very critical words for us. His main concern actually was looking at the metrics, and we continued to work on this with the province as well. The Human Development Index was of primary importance to him, and he wanted, in fact, for the province to be pretty close to the top as far as HDI is concerned. And so as we worked with the province and with Gov, we introduced the resilience framework. The resilience framework really was the result of coming together of different experts, both in academia, in practice, in government, national, local, as well as other organizations, CSOs and professions, really looking at intersectionalities of exposure and vulnerability of the country, and particularly local governments themselves, and linking these different pillars: human development, the economy, infrastructure, environment, and human security, each of which have indicators on their own, and we try to measure these over time through a program, which I'll speak a little bit about later. But leadership was the critical component, and one of the reasons for choosing Bataan was the quality of the leadership that Governor Abbott had already represented over time. And as we have known, whether science and technology innovation are present in some strength institutionally, if the leadership does not embrace what is available in terms of the knowledge and the tools and the technologies, then the value of the science, of the research, of the different technological platforms really will not reach their optimum contribution as far as the development of the country. So leadership and resiliency, and at this point, really looking at impacts in terms of local government systems where risk actually is generated, reducing deaths, damage, property, infrastructure, agriculture for food security, and ensuring development. So this kind of system of systems approach was what we introduced to the local governments, and the local government of Bataan was one of those who already had been hitting the ground running. As we worked with Gov, we discovered that he already had programs that in fact looked at risk across the different pillars. And so in terms of the environment, he already had a program to actually plant 1 million trees. He also had an ambient air quality monitoring system, which was highly sophisticated. And we wanted, in fact, to contribute a little bit more to that. And so the Manila Observatory Air Quality Dynamics team also did several visits to actually see how we could work and contribute to the air quality monitoring system. But also in the local economy, beyond large industries, Gov already had put in place support for MSMEs, support for livelihood. And in fact, very recently, as you see at the bottom there, this employment contact center, because of the impacts of COVID and the loss of employment of many of the constituents, this was in fact put in place fairly quickly in order to field people to possible places of work where they might in fact continue their employment. So these are some of the programs that we discovered are already in place and were already in the same direction as the resilience agenda that we had been proposing. I just wanted to dwell a little bit on human development, particularly in health. One of the reasons we actually were led to Bataan was the leadership that Gov had already displayed in health, public health governance. And this was work that was done with the Zwillig Family Foundation before I actually joined the board. One of your constituents there in Bataan as well, Prof. Ernie Garilao, whom some of you may know, former DAR secretary, really highlighted the potential for disaster resilience and public health governance converging. And as you can see, Gov had already put in place a way to incentivize barangays to actually to maintain a certain standard of public health service and also measure their progress along the way. That extended to COVID, and that in fact is where they are today. They are monitoring very, very closely what is happening in the province due to COVID-19. I just wanted to show you a little bit of the work that we've done with some of the scientists and engineers that are working with us and Gov in terms of the COVID-19. We've established this spatio-temporal platform together with the provincial government, and JOF was a very big part of that. They are able to track geospatially and temporally the progress of COVID, the progress of the vaccination deployment, the usage of their facilities and hospitals. And we have urged them, and as you can see, they have begun to look at the way other hazards in the province can possibly affect the capacity that they have put in place in terms of public health service delivery. So this is a kind of spatio-temporal approach that we've used, even in terms of the other exposure elements that are in Bataan. And this is in fact where the discussion earlier on the resilience of the province can in fact be most meaningful. So exposure to livestock, because there's a considerable agriculture sector still there, commercial buildings, so in terms of commercial development concentrations, educational facilities, and these are just some of the maps that have been put in place already in partnership with Bataan. In terms of floods, we've actually already taken a look at, again, agriculture, commercial buildings, and educational facilities. And as you can see, development is concentrated on the lower elevations, and therefore there is in fact that potential risk for some of these capacities institutionally to be affected by the hazards that the province normally faces. So these are just some of the efforts that we've done with the province in order to begin to analyze the risk through exposure, vulnerability, and hazards. The National Resilience Council actually has and I'll end with these last two slides, has a 3-year, 2-track program. We are now in the adapt year, which is really looking at, after the baselining on risk to the province, how can we improve our existing systems in terms of investments in resilience to reduce risk and vulnerability to events. We have these 2 tracks, leadership and governance, and science and technology. And I think this is why this talk is most timely. We're at the point where we're looking at systems thinking and how we can change existing systems. But I draw your attention to below the red box on science and technology, which is solutions-driven action research and choosing the right tools. And this is where the connection with PAASE and BPSU really comes into play. Finally, in terms of today's discussion, and I'm looking forward to hearing from all our experts as well as from Gov on the work that the province has actually done, it's really the linkage between resilience SDGs and plastics, the issue of pollution and resource management, and these 3 particular SDGs: good health and well-being, clean water, sustainable cities, climate action, life on below water, and life on land. All the SDGs, of course, intersect, but these are the 6 primary SDGs that we are looking at in terms of the discussion today. And we're looking forward to learning from all of you. Gov, thank you very much for also gracing this talk. And we look forward to what you are also going to be sharing in your presentation today. Thank you very much, Giselle and CP.
Thank you, Ma'am Tony.
Giselle?
Yes, Gov, CP and Gov, Abet, it's your turn to speak.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. So thank you, Ma'am Tony, for that background that you gave about our initiative here in Bataan. And the National Resilience Council has been a very big help, as well as the Zwillig Family Foundation. Our vision for the province, as was presented by Ma'am Tony, is to have the highest Human Development Index and the lowest poverty measurement in the entire country. Now, why did we choose this vision? It is because the HDI is one of the measurement for the quality of life. And as public servants, our role is to make lives better in our constituency. And under the management principle that if it cannot be measured, it cannot be managed. And if it cannot be managed, it cannot be improved. So under that principle, we adopted the HDI, which is a measure. It is something measurable. And that's what we're doing in the province of Bataan. So we entered the PGS, or the Performance Governance System, early in my first term of governorship in the province of Bataan. And under the PGS, we start with the visioning exercise, where we consult all the sectors with regards to their aspiration for the province, for their lives, and for their sector. And we compile them together and come up with the vision. And this is the vision we came up with. And of course, the vision has to be time-bound, it has to be exact, and it has to be measurable. That's why we chose the HDI. And the HDI, as you may know, has 3 major components: life expectancy or health, per capita income, or the economy, lives, a job, livelihood and jobs. And the third one is access to quality education. So what we did is that we aligned all the departments based on their mandate to the vision, and we gave them what we call strategic initiatives, which is what will give the highest impact based on their mandate aligned to the vision. And those are what we measure aside from the whirlwinds or the routine responsibilities of the department. And we rate their performance accordingly. And by doing so, we give incentives for those departments that attain their strategic initiatives and give efficiency in their routine or in their day-to-day services that they provide. This is part of the performance governance system program. And what we're trying to do here is to create a culture of meritocracy, so that whoever is more deserving, whoever is hardworking, and whoever attains the goals and the target gets incentivized, as opposed to the normal way that the government does this, is that everybody by December gets the same bonus. So whether you work hard or not, you're treated equally. So and for us, that will create a culture of mediocrity. So that this PGS helped us, number one, rationalize and give a clear direction to the vision of the province, which came from the different sectors and the people. Number two, create a culture of meritocracy so that the departments and the staff and the individuals would really work hard, and they would be incentivized so that we can attract the best people, the best talent to serve the province of Bataan. So that's what we've been doing. And we started with, among the three major components of HDI, we started with health, because it's the most important thing. Compared to the next two, which is also important, but in terms of education and income, of course, health is the most important, because even if you have a high level of education and you're earning a lot, if your health is not in good condition, it doesn't mean anything. So good thing we encountered the Zwillig Family Foundation, and they helped us in our initiative to have a higher life expectancy and bring forth healthier lives for the people of Bataan. And this is also coincided with the implementation of the National Healthcare Act, which really is a lot of help and contribution to our effort in increasing the life expectancy or contributing to the good health outcomes of the province. So we have a lot of collaboration, and it was ongoing until the pandemic happened. That's why everything was derailed when this pandemic happened. But some of our initiatives, Ma'am Tony presented with regards to health, is that our strategy with regards to health is that to have a higher life expectancy, we decided to measure the death count of the province, know the underlying causes of death, try to reverse engineer and prevent with our intervention succeeding causes of death, whether it is by natural causes or unnatural causes. And if we are successful by doing so, because of natural population growth and natural migration, we would have increased life expectancy here in the province of Bataan. And one of our major initiatives in this part was the One Bataan Seal of Healthy Barangay, where every month we gave barangays a target to lessen the dengue occurrences in the barangay, lessen the natural and unnatural causes of death, efficiency in immunization. This was before the pandemic. Their contribution in the 1 million trees for One Bataan, decreasing, or if they have zero animal bites in the barangay, which is of course in line with the proper healthcare program of the province, and so on and so forth. At first glance, one might think that these are little initiatives, but if you compile them all, this is the major problem in our healthcare system, where a lot of minor diseases, a lot of dengue cases because it was not prevented, a lot of animal bites clog the healthcare system, and you have specialists in your hospital tending to all these cases as opposed to tending to the more serious illnesses of the province. So this has a lot to do with the service delivery network in the public health aspect to help the curative side of the healthcare system. And it was going well. At first, no barangay was able to satisfy the requirement. But after a few months, we saw barangay complying and meeting the target of these very hard requirements. A lot of the provinces had spikes in their dengue cases, and we had lower dengue cases after some time that we implemented this project, which really saved lives and unburdened the hospital system at that time. So it is really very important and a major part of reducing the number of deaths and increasing the life expectancy of the province. What's very good about this program is that we put the problem in context and the solution in context, which is in the barangay level, which is the smallest unit or the most basic unit of our government. And every day, every waking day for the barangay officials, they concentrate on these specific targets, which will be measured at the end of the month, and they will be recognized and they will be given incentives accordingly. So that's one major initiative, and we did that also in the peace and order aspect. That's why together with the PNP, our index crime for the past 6 or 7 years has really decreased here in the province of Bataan. This is the chart that we do together with the PNP. And in this case, for every 20% reduction in index crime per town, the chief of police and his staff gets an incentive every month. And we compiled this, we included this in the One Bataan Seal of Healthy Barangay, that if there is lower crimes in the barangay for that certain month, the barangay officials also get an incentive. So it all adds up, and the efforts are being added together, and there is collaboration between the different agencies in the province. So that's one example of the things we're doing. And we're starting to do the same things, the same measurements with regards to education, which is a major part of the HDI. And also we're starting to do that in the area of per capita income, or the jobs and the livelihood that is created in the province. So we're starting to measure these things and put them in context in the municipal and the barangay level, give targets, and give the appropriate incentives accordingly. So that's what we've been doing. What we've realized in the past is that earlier, my father was mentioned in starting most of the programs here in the province. He started with education, and it was under his term where the Bataan Peninsula State University was started. It used to be the Bataan State College. Then during my term as congressman, it became a state university. I was his chief of staff when we created the BPSC, and then eventually it became a university. He had a massive infrastructure program for classrooms during his time, so our backlog was reduced tremendously. And he also started the healthcare program by renationalizing the Bataan General Hospital, which is now our apex hospital. And the reason why, one of the major reasons why we're coping with COVID, I don't know how we will survive or cope with this pandemic if it weren't for the Bataan General Hospital. So my father started with education, then health, and we continued this initiative. But we added another thing during our term, which is the livelihood part or the job creation. And the catalyst of which was presented by Ma'am Tony. It was the creation of the Bataan, the Freeport area of Bataan. A little background, it was the first economic zone in the country during the time of President Marcos. It was called the Bataan Economic Zone. Probably one of the first economic zones in Asia, because outsourcing then was more on assembly lines and production lines. And probably President Marcos saw this potential for the country, so he created the Bataan Economic Zone. And for a time, it was very successful. This was around 3 decades ago. Ford was there, Mattel, United Apparel, and very big multinationals were located there. But because of political unrest in the 80s and followed by labor unrest, the investors started retreating and backing out. So jobs decreased and it became a ghost town until such time when I was in Congress and my father was governor. And we saw that it was such a waste of government and public investment because all the infrastructures were dilapidating and very few workers left in that area. And of course, Subic and Clark emerged in Region 3, and we became what we said, the ugly third sister of these free ports and economic zone. So when I was in Congress, I filed a bill to convert the Bataan Economic Zone into a free port. And after much hurdles and challenges, it became law. And we started marketing, doing roadshows, inviting investments. After a couple of years, our first anchor locator came and many followed. So from a sleepy, dilapidated economic zone, it became a hustling and bustling free port. From a few thousand jobs, pre-pandemic, we rose to around close to 50,000 jobs. And to think that the Freeport area of Bataan is just one of the economic zones in the province. Of course, we have SBMA, we have the Hermosa Economic Zone. SBMA, by the way, is 70% Bataan. We have the Morong Economic Zone, we have the Tieza Tourist Enterprise Zone in Mount Samat. We have the DND, or the Defense Economic Zone, in Limay. So with regards to the economic side or the jobs creation, we wanted to attract investment, create growth, so that we can produce thousands of jobs that will help family fend for themselves and stand on their 2 feet. And have better lives. And with free education and a good health care, life would be better in the province of Bataan. So that's what we've been doing. But it was quite naive of us thinking that all these three things would contribute to a better life. What we found out, and this is what I presented in the National Resilience Council in one of our big events in the MOA area, is that it's not enough to have a good, of course, all these things are still work in progress. No? To have a good educational system, to have a good healthcare, which we're trying to do, and of course by reverse engineering the causes of death and increasing life expectancy in the province, and inviting investment, creating growth to produce thousands of jobs. What we realize, especially in Mariveles, which is the epicenter of the job creation before the pandemic, is that housing and township development should come side by side with all these developments. True, we were able to create thousands of new jobs pre-pandemic. In fact, we have a website, we call it hotjobsbataan.com. And there were so many available jobs being offered to our people before the pandemic. But if they don't have a proper housing facility, they still will have poor lives. They will still be at risk, and lives will not be stable in the province. That's what we've realized, and that is why, after realizing this, we created this program to develop township projects all across the province. We are doing one in Orion. We're doing a development in Balanga. We're doing some development in Mariveles. And we also invited the private developers, the private sectors in housing to do this development, so that we can catch up with the backlog of the housing units in the province of Bataan. We also created a housing office to coordinate with the Department of Housing and Human Settlements, the newly created department, and of course NHA, Pag-ibig, and all these SHAPSI, and all these housing units, so that we can really have a massive development and catch up with the lacking housing facilities in Bataan. If we're successful in doing this, of course it won't happen overnight, but if we're successful in doing this and the jobs availability come back after the pandemic, and if we're able to provide good housing facilities for the people, we would have made a major part of our population, we have elevated them to middle class, because most of them have jobs, but it's the housing facilities that they lack. And our strategy in doing this housing facility, of course, we studied the lapses or the loopholes or the insufficiencies of the previous housing projects, and we studied it very hard, and we want to cure it, to cure all these lapses or these the deficiencies in our development, so that our development will be more successful and more complete. So the strategy is to get the informal dwellers from where they are now, which is high risk, low opportunity, and transplant them to a place where it is high opportunity and low risk. So this has a lot to do with resilience. Number two, so first, high opportunity, low risk. Number two, it should be a township development. Schools should be there, health centers, RHU, even hospitals should be there. Amenities that make lives easy should be there, transport terminal, other commercial development which is needed in our day-to-day lives, access to food, water, of course, power and internet. So it should be a township development. And what we learned, especially in our engagement with the NRC and with other places which had successful housing development like Singapore, we should do it vertically. Because, well, in Bataan, property is getting very expensive, especially if you want to put the informal dwellers in a high opportunity, low risk area. So this real estate would cost a lot. So we have to make every square meter count. So we have to develop vertically, just like what Singapore is doing in their HDB project or in their Housing Development Board project. We've benchmarked several times with them. And it is elevated, but it is a township development. And most of the amenities and things that are needed in everyday lives, like food, they have the hawker centers, they have police stations, they have libraries, sports centers, recreation, and so on and so forth. These are present. So that's the second. So first, high opportunity, low risk. 2, it should be township and vertical development. And 3, what's lacking in our previous housing development in the country is the estate management. So this is something we should take on. Otherwise, once we deliver it to the recipients, and if there are no more, and since it is something new to them, they might not be able to take care of these facilities immediately. So estate management is very important until such time that we train the homeowners association and they can manage themselves. So these 3 things are very important in attaining the highest human development index for the province and attaining a high resilience for our people. This is what we've realized in the years of experience here in Bataan. So a good healthcare system, a good educational system, lots of jobs because of investment, create thousands of jobs, and a good housing program. If we're able to do this, we'll be able to manage all the aspects in the lives of our people, from health, from education, even with jobs or livelihood. And by doing so, we would have made our society more resilient, and people will have better lives and higher quality of lives if we're able to do this. So we started already. We have, aside from the housing development that I've mentioned in partnership with NHA, we are looking at bigger projects, because what we realize is that our engagement with NHA is good. It produced like 1,000 housing units a year, and but it is not enough, especially given the backlog that we have in the province. So now we're looking at 10,000, 5,000, 10,000 housing units. We're looking at developments in Mariveles, where the economic activities are located, in Mariveles, in Limay, in Hermosa. We're looking at these projects to create massive township projects, high opportunity, low risk, so that people can have better lives. And I mentioned earlier that the bridge hopefully will be forthcoming. It is now in the detailed engineering design, which will culminate in December of this year. And after that, it will be ready for procurement. It is already approved by the NEDA board, and I see Secretary Pernia in the room. So thank you very much, Secretary Pernia, for your support in this very vital project, not only for Bataan, but also for the economy of the country. And with the bridge, as I've said earlier, Bataan will be in the middle of a population to around 40, 50 million people and 2/3 of the country's GDP. And to complement the bridge,
Gov, pardon me. There's
yes.
a request for you to show the image of the bridge again. I think the scientists would like to view it. So if you
Sige.
kindly.
Doc,
Salamat
meron
po.
ka bang ano? Meron ka bang
Because when
bago
you showed it, Gov, earlier, we had not formally started. We were not
yes,
see
yes.
that. The infrastructure,
Yeah.
build there. There you have
So
it.
yeah, so this is the map. But we have, I don't know if Geoff prepared also the perspective of the bridge, but this map tells you a lot. You see Bataan Peninsula and connected by the red dotted line, that's the bridge. So Bataan will cease to be a dead end, and we will be in the middle of 40, 50 million people and 2/3 of the country's GDP. So you see the airports around, the Subic, Clark, the proposed Bulacan Airport, NAIA 1, 2, and 3, and the proposed Sangli Airport. So we are the only free port in Manila Bay, that is in Mariveles, and Manila Bay is still the center of trade for the country. So to complement the bridge, we are envisioning a transshipment hub and a seaport where we can accommodate the bigger ships to lower the cost of trade, and so that we can have a transshipment hub in the country, which is something we don't have. That's why our economy is not very competitive. Since we're a free port, if we accommodate the bigger ships, the cargo for the neighboring countries can be unloaded in our seaport and be picked up by other vessels tax-free, since it is the only free port in Manila Bay. And because it's connected by a bridge to Calabarzon, 70% of the cargo in Manila ports are located in the manufacturing region of the Calabarzon. So we can cater to that by just crossing the short span of the route, crossing Manila Bay via the bridge. So that is also a vital infrastructure that would really help Bataan attain more growth and produce more jobs, but also help the country. So together with the port, we are envisioning a port city development I've mentioned earlier, where we want to locate 5,000 to 10,000 residents in the Mariveles area. A lot of them are workers from the Freeport area of Bataan. So this development will not only make our Freeport more competitive by developing the port, but also giving proper housing facility to the people of Bataan. And of course, this is high opportunity, low risk township, and we're also planning the estate management for this project. And we're talking a lot with not only national government, the housing authorities, but also with the private sector, so that we can fund this project. As you may know, this will cost a lot for sure, but it's the only way to go to make Bataan more resilient and to give better lives to the people. And we're just starting in Mariveles. So there's another perspective of the bridge. You see the Mount Mariveles and the Peninsula of Bataan. You see Corregidor, and this is the bridge crossing Manila Bay towards Cavite. So after the detailed engineering design, which is supposed to be completed by December, it will be ready for procurement. So I hope we're appealing to the national government, we're making representation that hopefully we can start the procurement process, so that we can, really ground break before the term of this administration ends, and see the realization of this bridge in about 5 years. And of course, because of this bridge, we will create more investment and growth and jobs for the province and for the region.
Thank you so much, Gov.
It's fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you. So it's a big challenge. It's not easy, but we're trying to do our best to go step by step, and we've gone a long way. And now we're on the verge of implementing the development project in our anchor location, which is in Mariveles. The other locations I've mentioned earlier is ongoing. The one in Orion for the Fisherman's Village. Just to give you an example, in the Fisherman's Village, aside from the other facilities like schools, health centers, sports complex, we are also going to construct sort of a yacht club for the bangkas of the fishermen. So it's in the coastline area, but very safe. We have the proper distance from the coast, so they're protected by storm surge. And another component, since they are fishermen, we want to protect their livelihoods and create a sort of yacht club to protect their bangkas and to make sure that if there are storms like these, we will have a marina authority in that sort of a yacht club, and no fishing when there is storm coming until the storm passes. We can also manage illegal fishing. We can also manage waste by doing so. And of course, it will contribute to better lives for the fishermen. Just to let everyone know, that these fishermen are not from Bataan. They are from Samar, they're from Masbate. But through the years, they built up. They came here, they migrated because I guess services are more efficient. Free schooling, enough number of classrooms, free healthcare. I sometimes I go to them. I ask when I see babies where they gave birth. They said Bataan General Hospital. I asked them how are the services. They said it was good. I asked how much they paid for. They said they didn't pay for anything. So this is one challenge also. With high economic growth, we realize there's a lot of in-country migration happening. So it's a race. So I was telling our team, especially Joff, that aside from the creation of township development, we should have a measure, we should have a clear measure and policy to control informal settlers in the province. And this is a challenge because in our constitution, we have the right to travel, and we are not a separate republic where we can control immigration. So this is an in-country migration happening. In the Freeport area of Bataan, we have people from Mindanao working, people from Visayas, people from North Luzon working there. That's why there's a lot of informal dwellers also. And just to show you the supply in housing and the demand for housing, bed spaces in Mariveles pre-pandemic would cost as much as a mortgage to a Pag-ibig house. And this is just a bed space. So we really have to cope with these challenges. Yes, ma'am.
Gov, thank you so much. May we request you to give some closing statements before we transition to the other presentations?
Yeah. So having said that, and having said the enormous challenge that we are facing, and the solution is quite clear, but of course it's easier said than done. Having said all these things, first of all, I'd like to thank you, to thank everyone for taking the time out and listening to our challenges, and hopefully we can have a collaborative engagement so that we can overcome all these challenges. And it's a privilege to be in the midst of specialists, engineers, scientists. Of course, township projects will create a lot of waste, as you may know. Hopefully we can use, I don't know if we can use 3D printing for the construction of the vertical housing facility. I think that's being done in other places in the world, because the faster we do this properly, the faster we would solve the problem and catch up with the backlog of this problem. So again, on behalf of the province of Bataan, I'm sure you will have a lot of solutions in mind, and we're ready to listen and we're ready to implement so that we can give better lives to our people. And hopefully we can be the proof of concept for the entire country, because it's easier if you have a proof of concept. It's easier to replicate. It's easier to explain to the rest of the country if you have a proof of concept. So we're willing to be the guinea pig. We're willing to be the proof of concept. So we're open to the suggestions and the interventions that you would give us, and we will be good partners as always. Ma'am Tony knows this. And once again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Gov.
You, Tony, and thanks, Gov Abet, and good to hear all the wonderful developments happening in Bataan. You know, working with scientists and the focus in collecting and analyzing data to solve problems such as increasing life expectancy and improving environmental conditions, or whether it be job creation, we can only hope that other LGUs would emulate. Bataan is really at the cusp of exploding in terms of development, simply because in the past it lagged behind, no, in the development of NCR, you know, Cavite and Bataan included. But with the bridge and the developments happening in the province, you actually are in the best position, because you have almost like a clean slate province wherein all the master planning could be done and avoid all the mistakes that we have done in Metro Manila. So congrats in advance, Governor Ambet. Before we continue, I'd like to acknowledge some of our friends in our audience, no? Starting with our friends from DOST, and DOST Region 3 is well represented, including RD JC Sikat is in the audience. Our friends from PTRI, of course, are here.
Hi, RD.
DOST MIRDC, led by, good morning, MIRDC, led by Director Bob Dizon, who hails from Bataan as well. Gov is also here. Our scientists from ITDI, friends from DOST Pictured, and our regular Fireside friends, Tito Aliga, Al Serafica, Liza V, Sec Ernie, and my colleagues from UP, they're all here. All in all, there are more than 70 people in our webinar today. Okay, our fireside chat today really explores this curious intersection of a province, in this case Bataan, and science. And in true Filipino fashion, it all started with the multiple social and professional intersections of key personalities, Tony knowing you, and Tony knowing Giselle, and myself, and everybody. You know, it's so Filipino, and that includes all our speakers today. It tells us how science and governance can work hand in hand and help solve long-standing problems. Our next speaker is Dr. John Ryan Dizon, who is professor and director of DR3AM Center at the Bataan Peninsula State University. He's a product of St. Louis University and received his master's and PhD from South Korea. He is a member of the steering committee of the Advanced Manufacturing Center, which you will learn more about. And being based in Bataan, it could very well be the seat of additive manufacturing research of the country. So without much further ado, I'd like to turn over the floor to Dr. Dizon. Kokoy, are you there?
Yes,
And if you
Sir.
want to start sharing your slides, now would be the time. Okay, we can see your slide. Kokoy. Go ahead.
Okay, can you see the presentation, sir?
Yes, yes.
Okay, yeah. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Sir CP, for that introduction. And it's really an honor to be invited in today's activity. Thank you, Paase and NRC. Just a moment.
Kokoy.
Oh, yeah, just
Sorry.
a moment, sir. Okay. Yeah, and good morning, Governor Abet and all the officials of Bataan and also the OST officials and staff. Uh, Today I will be discussing how the SDGs may be achieved through 3D printing, of course, here in Bataan. Now, 3D printing is now being used by all sectors globally. The industry will grow due to the adoption of various industries, including automotive, aerospace, defense, and healthcare. Sir CP, nakikita mo ba yung paglipat ko ng slide?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. For those of you who are not familiar with this technology, 3D printing, more formally known as additive manufacturing, follows a process of, number one, modeling using computer-aided design softwares like AutoCAD, SolidWorks, or Google SketchUp. And then you convert it into an STL file, and then you slice it into hundreds or thousands of layers. Next, number four is 3D printing, and number five is post-processing to improve the surface, and the properties of the part. There are many different 3D printing technologies available globally, and one of the most common is the fused deposition modeling. Its principle is like the glue gun, wherein a plastic material is melted by an extruder, and the extruder would follow the computer-aided design model, and the part is then created one layer on top of another. Okay. There are hundreds of companies complementing the development of 3D printing technologies. These include companies developing materials, software, scanners, networks, online community services, marketplaces, and applications. So we could just imagine how many different skills we can support and thrive in this environment. In 2017, I was sent by DOST. I think it's the program of Sir CP and Sir Gobet back in, I think, 2015. I was sent by DOST to Case Western Reserve University for a 6-month additive manufacturing training under, of course, Professor Ed Vincula's supervision. And in 2018, DOST funded the establishment of our country's first additive manufacturing research lab. We call it AMREL for short. And the laboratory is a facility where faculty and students can do research as well as share and create their ideas. The laboratory focuses on the following: advanced materials, applied mechanics, academic makerspace, advanced manufacturing, advancing manpower or training, and advanced modeling. Now, AMREL is now transitioning into a bigger facility, what we call the Dream Center, which was approved by the BPSU board of regents last, I think, 2 years ago. This will expand our R&D activities and outreach. Now let us see how 3D printing can address each of the 17 sustainable development goals. For goal number 1, no poverty, access is the key word. 3D printing provides everyone, especially the poor, access to new technologies and capabilities, as well as the parts and devices they need. For example, spare parts. With 3D printing, everybody can easily create farm tools, automotive replacement parts, or just simple household parts like knobs. We actually supplied one of these knobs in, I think, one company in Maribeles, the PRII. One of their equipment has a broken knob, so we designed and provided this 3D printed knob. Many other parts, including wrenches, screwdrivers, bolts, and nuts, may be produced with this technology and help our everyday activities. Last year, Centro Medico Hospital here in Balanga, local hospital, needed a 3D printed mechanical coupling in order to repair their hospital beds. I think 20 or 30 beds are broken and needs this special coupling, which they could not find anywhere here in the Philippines or abroad. We supplied 100 pieces to them, and their beds have been working properly ever since. Figure A shows the broken coupling, B shows the original and the 3D printed part in red color, and C shows the installed 3D printed coupling and ready for action. Several other spare parts requested by the community have been produced in the laboratory over the years. Next, there are several ways 3D printing addresses the second goal, which is zero hunger. The first one is food 3D printing. Food intended for people of different ages and needs can be 3D printed. For example, the third image, 3D printed vegetables allows for customized nutrition. 3D printing allows for creative food production, including, of course, chocolates. Cakes can also be printed, especially the icing and frosting. Pasta, pizza, and salad have all been tried in various parts of the world. Cookie molds can be printed, especially and cookie molds and cutters to come up with different cookie designs can also be printed using food-safe 3D printing materials. How about in agriculture? We can 3D print drones and drone parts that can do mechanical weeding and watering, as well as plant holders shown on the right. 2 years ago, we worked with students from Bataan National High School for their 3D printed drone project. And they were able to successfully print the drones, and they even participated as our guest at the National Science and Technology Week here in Vista Mall. Fruit picking devices, customizable for different types of fruits, and drip irrigation systems can also be supported by this technology. Garden hose splitters, sprinklers, seed sowing tools, and many other agricultural applications have been demonstrated in different countries. Farm scale models, which could serve as a microcosm for farms and landscapes, can be printed. And this can be used for farm planning and optimization. Speaking of scale models, I think last year we had a similar study wherein we 3D printed scale models of structures and terrains. So here are some examples. The Bataan Death March Marker, the Dambana ng Kagitingan, or what we call the Mount Sumat Cross, of course, the Capitol Building, Morong Church, the map of Bataan. The right one shows the terrain of the whole province. In relation to this, last month we had an inquiry from the army. They wanted to have scale models of terrains where they are assigned. This actually has many different uses, including as souvenir items, which we have discussed with a representative from the Bataan Tourism Office, Ms. Danica Tigas. For goal number 3, good health and well-being. Let us start with medicine. Several groups have already conducted research on 3D printed medicinal drugs. Actually, before the pandemic, one pharmacy student from UP Manila was requesting to work with us for her thesis regarding this topic. Another application is a 3D printing of medical models, which could help doctors prepare for major operations, parang pag-practicean po nila. Many groups around the world have been studying 3D printing of bones for bone replacement, as well as cranium replacement, which is one of the popular applications of 3D printing. It could either be plastic or metallic material. Ear cartilage, heart valves, and many other body parts can now be printed. Skin, stem cells, and even the heart have been tried to be produced, although the use are still controversial and requires more clinical trials and ethics and some clearance from governments. During this pandemic, face shields, respirators, ventilator parts have all been produced. Last year, during the shortage of PPEs, I think it was in April and May, we 3D printed PPEs and provided to hospitals in Bataan, Pampanga, and Zambales. We produce face shields, ear guards, door pulls, and mask flanges. 3D printed prostheses and orthoses are also now being globally used. The one on the right has been developed in BPSU by a mechanical engineering student. In 2019, his research has been presented at an international conference in Japan. And earlier this year, we were also able to publish his paper in a Scopus indexed journal. In 2019, students from Olongapo City National High School also explored 3D printed orthotics with us. Now, casings for what we call the nano environmental monitoring system to measure indoor environmental quality can be printed as well as air filters. Spare parts for medical devices, in this case, umbilical cord clamps can be produced. Now, let's move on to the field of dentistry. Night guards and aligners, crowns, as well as surgical guides are some of the most common applications of 3D printing in dentistry. And now for goal number 4, quality education. The 21st century learning skills include critical thinking, collaboration, communication, and creativity. 3D printing provides ways, as can be seen in this publication, provides ways to motivate the learning of 21st century learning skills inside the classroom. Instructional aids and models such as 3D printed molecules, sharpener, and stamps, geometrical models in teaching math such as screw, pyramid, puzzles, biological models such as DNA, insulin, plant cell. In astronomy, we actually have a partner here, the Center for Astronomy in Rizal Technological University. We can print nebula and other phenomena. To support blind education, we can 3D print maps, braille, 3D models, tactile graphics, and others. For disaster response, which could be useful for STEM students, pipes, fittings, and water filter for clean water supply, and also dreaming big, emergency shelter. Right? In Google, I found this. They could print it in less than 1 hour. 3 cubic meter shelter for emergency purposes. For goal number 5, gender equality. Yeah, number 1 is access. But of course, let's give a very good example in fashion. We can 3D print jackets, dresses, jewelry such as bracelets, earrings, rings, timepieces, etc. Bags, ties, and even shoes, where they say your shoes may be customized according to the shape and comfort of your feet. For goal number 6, clean water and sanitation. Let us start with simple examples. Pipe connectors and pipe fittings, which are very useful in ordinary days and as mentioned earlier, in times of disaster. For desalination, membrane separation and filtration, the following parts can be printed: supports, biocarriers for wastewater management, and hydratable plastics. We are partnering with a university in Sydney, University of Technology, Sydney, for a possible project focusing on this one. Evaporators, solar absorbers, and water purifiers have all been explored by different research groups. For goal number 7, affordable and clean energy. Electrolytes, microbatteries, and fuel cells may be printed. Microelectrodes, concentrators, and solar energy trees. This one. Now let's see how these 2 goals can be addressed. Goal number 8, decent work and economic growth. And number 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Excuse me, Sir CP, can you still hear me clearly?
Yes, Coco, you have 4 minutes left.
Yeah, I will.
Okay, thank you.
Finish soon. Let us start with transportation. Oak Ridge National Laboratory, where Professor Advincula is affiliated, produced some of the first 3D printed cars in the world. BMW, Nanyang Technological University, Shell and Toyota have their versions, as well as Bentley and Audi. Most parts in these cars have been manufactured using different 3D printing technologies. For aerospace, here are some examples. For Airbus, they printed air ducts, wall panels, seat framework, and many others. It has been reported that millions of parts used by airplanes are already being 3D printed. Jet engines, wing brackets for airplanes, gearbox housing, satellite parts and frames. We have a proposal in partnership with the Philippine Space Agency to produce cube satellites. So this will be related to this application. Metal bracket for space applications, they reported a 25% cost reduction and 50% weight reduction when 3D printed parts are used compared with conventional machine parts. For robotics, we have a robot dog and cat capable of ground contact, touch, infrared, distance, night vision, etc. For goal number 10, reduced inequalities. As earlier mentioned, access is the keyword, and 3D printing provides access to affordable manufacturing technology to everyone, whenever and wherever they may be, whatever nationality or social status they have, and that has the potential to reduce inequality. For goal number 11, sustainable cities and communities. Let us start with the construction. 3D printing of houses and bridges. Here's an example in Amsterdam, a cabin, an office in Dubai, office building in Dubai, a bridge in Spain, an apartment building in China, as mentioned by a governor a while ago, and a castle in Minnesota. BPSU is also planning to lead or at least take part in the concrete 3D printing initiatives of DOST with our colleague, Engineer Hill Cruz, actively participating in the discussions. For goal number 12, responsible consumption and production, 3D printing may reduce the needed resources and materials, energy used, finished goods inventory for just-in-time manufacturing, and as well as CO2 emissions. 3D printing can be used to print several pieces as a single unit, also known as part consolidation, which is not possible using more conventional processes. So with this, we will have new knowledge and skills and new areas of and opportunities to do business. For goal number 13, climate action, 3D printing may offer some solutions to address this target by 3D printing terrains and maps, accessories for reinforcing houses and during disasters, as mentioned earlier. For goal number 14, life below water, several research groups have already 3D printed corals and coral reefs. This one is in France. They 3D printed a reef which mimics the rocky characteristics of the reef. Figure A shows how it is being printed. B shows the 3D printed reef. C shows the installed reef. And in D, we can see that the reef has become a natural habitat for fish and other life forms below water. Another group 3D printed molds and casted in concrete. This was in Maldives. Another group in Hong Kong 3D printed tiles that attach to reefs and improve their chances of survival. For goal number 15, life on land, one example is the, as mentioned earlier, 3D printed drones that could plant seeds. Other more indirect applications are 3D printing of forest models for education and natural resource management. Another application is the 3D printing of terrain, which could be used in forest management as well, and souvenir items. For goal 16, 3D printing promotes inclusive societies as is it easy to learn, access, acquire. We have 3D printers costing I think around 10,000-15,000 pesos that could be easily acquired by the community and the schools. For goal number, acquired compared with conventional processes, including compared with welding, milling, casting, injection molding, and others. For goal 17, partnerships for the goals. It is easier to establish partnerships with local and global partnerships as 3D printing enables distributed and cooperative manufacturing as shown in this framework. That framework was from our paper published last year, which we have done collaboratively several thousand miles apart. We exchanged designs and experiences online. And by the way, we were one of the first groups to publish a paper on the use of 3D printing in producing PPEs to protect against COVID-19. This September, we'll be hosting the first International Forum on Additive Manufacturing and Advanced Materials. I think this is the first such conference hosted by a local university on the 3D printing technology. So we would like to invite everyone. After my presentation, here are some things you might have noticed. Number one, these solutions to address SDGs can be manufactured using other methods. But why do we need to use 3D printing? The main reasons are, number one, 3D printing is a highly customizable process. Number two is it allows for local production, meaning printing whenever and wherever is possible. With 3D printing, we are only limited by our imagination. So yeah, you can see here the resilience framework and the HDI targets and quality growth targets of Bataan. We can address this using this technology. 3D printing could be used reactively or proactively. Example for disasters, it is for reactive use. But for tech startups wanting to do business, it can be for proactive use and try to solve future problems and needs. Talking about futures thinking. How can we achieve SDGs in Bataan? First, we acknowledge that 3D printing is the present and future of manufacturing, as it also enables the industry 4.0. Second, we embrace it. And third, we dream big. But it is important to establish networks carefully, like NRC, with NRC and PAASE, the OST, and others, and carefully plan and take baby steps. And together, let us build a progressive, inclusive, and sustainable One Bataan, layer by layer. So we'd like to thank PAASE for this invitation, also NRC, DOSTP Shared for funding our activities, DOSTP Shared, AMSEN, DOST3, DOST Bataan, Sir Gobet, BPSU Research and Development Office, BPSU officials led by President Rodis, and our students and staff who helped in assembling this presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Kokoy. 3D printing is now viable for small run, highly sophisticated parts, like the examples that you mentioned, and even specialized materials, because you can control the composition of these materials. But I think very soon, as its cost further goes down, it may very well be competing against the traditional manufacturing processes that we are used to. And as you mentioned, Bataan may very well be the center for not only research, but also in the utilization of 3D printing parts and processes. So thanks again, Kokoy. We'll learn more about 3D printing from our next speaker, who is actually one of the mentors of Kokoy Dizon. Rigoberto Vincula is a research professor at Case Western Reserve University, is a fellow of the American Chemical Society, a product of UP Diliman, and a corresponding member of NAST. He was a former president of PAASE and one of the prime movers, if not the main man, in the Advanced Manufacturing Center of DOST. So I'll stop there kasi mahaba talaga ang CV ni Gobet. And Gobet, I'll turn over to you and hope to learn more about additive manufacturing from your talk. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much, CP. And of course, I'd like to acknowledge your contribution. Without your support as well, we would not have started the training program between the OST and my lab. And of course, Governor Abet Garcia, I really enjoyed your vision and accomplishments for our country, and more power to you. And hopefully Bataan will really indeed be the best example we have in terms of good governance and sustainability, but also a wonderful vision for our economy. And of course, Kokoy, I really am very proud of what you've accomplished, and I probably should not introduce 3D printing anymore after you've done such a good job. Well, in fact, today I would like to focus on plastics. And after all, that's part of the ecosystem we're talking about in terms of sustainability. And lastly, I'd like to acknowledge Toby, who's going to talk more chemistry and even policy about plastics. So when we look at plastics, it evokes many things in our mind, from packaging to paint to textile to waste. Actually, without plastics, society today would not function the way we know it. Otherwise, we'd still be using bamboo, paper, bottles, and everything based on natural materials. And traditionally, plastics are made by various types of for what we call formative manufacturing. So when you hear molding, injection molding, extrusion, thermoforming, that's how we generate plastic products and parts. So what are plastics? Well, the better term is polymer or macromolecule or large molecule. So I'm not going to bore you with a lot of chemistry. I'm a chemist actually, but I can give this much of a chemistry direction. But easy to say is that polymers and plastics are interrelated. These are large molecules made from petrochemicals, which you will see a connection with Bataan and the Philippines, JG Summit naphtha cracker. So these large molecules need to be processed, need to be molded and utilized in order to form a material. In fact, my specialization is actually in the area of nanomaterials, where we look at polymers and its application at interfaces, which actually improves products like shampoo or electronics or rubber or things like that. But I will not focus on that except give you a more macroscopic or big view of plastic. So when we talk about refining, petroleum refining, oil, gas, which by the way, we are actually rich in oil and gas. It's just in the West Philippine Sea. We need to claim that, okay? The oil refining industry produces not only gasoline, not only oil, but plastics. So when you think about plastics, it is very much related to the oil and gas industry. So speaking of Bataan, in Limay, Bataan, we have Petron. And of course, sad to hear, it's closing and hopefully it will reopen. But petroleum-based products is actually the key to any industrialized country. It's just too expensive to operate it if we don't have the right economic factor. So hopefully, many things can happen in the future for Petron or the refinery at Limay, Bataan. But at the same time, this should have been done back in the 60s. We have our naphtha cracker and petrochemical-based industry in Batangas. This investment, which was, I would say, even 40 or 50 years behind, Philippines should have invested in this technology and operation a long time ago, is our source of plastics, mainly polyolefins, or what we call polyethylene, polypropylene, polybutadiene, things that go into many plastic products and even rubber. The sad state is that most of the plastic we have is not recycled, reused, but most of it goes to the environment in the form of trash, waste, plastic soup, garbage. They clog all our esteros. They end up a lot in the ocean. We are not the biggest polluter, actually, in terms of plastic source, by no means. Most of it comes from several regions in the world, including the Mekong Delta, the rivers from China, and also Africa. And the Philippines, you see this, of course, a lot in Metro Manila. The problem is most of plastics today, as I said, not recycled, is part of what we call a linear economy, meaning they are produced from virgin feedstock. A lot of them end up in landfill. Some should go to incinerators. We don't use incineration right now in the Philippines, which is a bad decision. And leakage means it goes to the ocean. Yet about 5 to even 10% are recycled. The problem is during recycling, it competes with virgin plastic. So in other words, when virgin plastic is cheap or oil is cheap, then recycling becomes expensive, not to mention collection and change in society's behavioral ecosystem. So we can say that most of plastic is still with us. and growing. Growing in the sense that by 2050, plastic production will quadruple, and the ratio of plastics present in the environment will increase all the more, and the share of its consumption with respect to oil is also going to increase. So it's never going to go away. It's not a third world problem. It's a problem all over the world. The solution, of course, is to convert what we call a linear economy into a circular economy. And you probably used this term or seen this term before. What this simply means is that just like other industries that has done well, from iron, steel industries to bottle or paper, plastic has to be reused, recycled, and even now the new term is called upcycle, and I'll explain to you what upcycling means. That means that from the beginning, the plastic should be thought of as part of the economy that increases its value or reuse for the same, if not different purpose. Therefore, the goal of any economy or sustainability program should always be a circular economy. Now, many materials today, we can calculate what we call a life cycle analysis, which looks at the extraction or production of materials, its manufacturing, distribution, usage, and then end-of-life management. So in end-of-life management, you will prefer that it be reused rather than disposed as waste or landfill, or at least recover the energy by incineration. And incineration, by the way, is very viable because plastics, after all, is also fossil energy. It's derived from oil. So the question is, how can we be part of this virtuous, if not good, life cycle? So in life cycle stage, it actually takes into account the input in energy, the costs of production, or the environmental impact of production. And then finally, upon consumption or use, the inventory of the discharge. And that is sometimes has to do with monitoring pollution. So environmental impact assessment is always part of a life cycle analysis for any production. And I'll be quick on some of these slides because of time. You can see here in this matrix that from extraction to processing to conversion to product transportation to disposal, everything uses energy. So the energy equivalent of any part of the life cycle has to be taken. And by the way, in the Philippines, we have a very high cost of energy. And anything that we can do to lower the cost of energy can only help our companies and economy. So enter 3D printing, and I will defer some of this introduction because Kokoy has done a very good job. Back in 2016, when I gave this talk at the World Economic Forum, by their invitation, I gave a perspective of the future of additive manufacturing, which looked at the digital manufacturing that goes into space, inner space, biomedical application, robotics, and so on. The bottom line is any talk about innovation or Industry 4.0 cannot do without digital and additive manufacturing. And so these machines are readily available now. And as you'll see later, the Philippines actually has invented a very good operation in the Additive Manufacturing Center, a centerpiece project by DOST that is already in place. The improvement is that with additive manufacturing, you can have high complexity, high performance at the right time and right price compared to other types of manufacturing, or what we call formative manufacturing, which usually specializes only on volume. So with that type, and I'm going to go fast some of these slides because they have been introduced. Polymers or plastics are a key material. When we talk about cement, metal, ceramics, they are a part of 3D printing, but by volume, plastics are the most produced materials using additive manufacturing. And they are classified as a pyramid. So when we talk about commodity plastics for packaging, they usually form the base. But then when we have high performance polymer or plastic materials, they're very expensive and used for a very important part function. So you can see here that in 3D printing, you have a convergence of design and materials. And that is really the key towards high-tech industries, in that you can compete with the design and the high performance of materials that go into high performance parts and extreme functions or conditions. Let's take the case of the biomedical industry, which is a growing ecosystem here in the US that looks at 3D printing to manufacture orthesis and prosthesis devices, but actually a big scale coming to the dental industry. And what I like about this slide is it shows the ability to replace bone, different types of the external human extremities, but also the ability to change the design in order to influence density. Koke mentioned about cars. The first 3D printed car was made at Oak Ridge National Lab. The ability to change the design, operation, combination, or simplification of parts not only extends from the automotive, but also in the aerospace industry. In fact, automotive parts can take advantage of the ability to lightweight and combine parts to make very strong, simplified connections. Now, it was mentioned that additive manufacturing will play a big role in construction. Indeed, it's here. So speaking about mass housing or the ability to rapidly produce housing in emergency cases, even using Portland cement, additive manufacturing will play a big role. And I hope Bataan takes seriously at having the first additively manufactured subdivision, a houses in a subdivision, and it will be a game changer. And of course, many, many applications. So what we can see here is in terms of sources for 3D printing. So the Philippines has a lot of agro waste and fiber industries that produce waste products. In fact, we are very interested in using some of this biomass as part of the 3D printing system. Why? Because a lot of this biomass or materials coming from agro waste can actually be converted into feedstocks for making plastics and contribute to fiber parts in polymer composite. So a competition that's possible with fossil-based polymers are lignocellulosic or plant-based sources or biofeedstocks, again, with the right incentive and also performance. It's possible to compete with these materials. So maybe Toby might look at some of the lignocellulosic chemical intermediates, but in principle, this can contribute to formation of plastics like polyesters, polycarbonates, nylon, etc. Okay, so here is just a simplification of what we mean by bio-based feedstocks or plastics. In the area of recycling, so what you can see here is that many parts that are coming from the automotive industry are disposed. A possibility is to separate parts based on plastics that can be recycled. In that these plastic parts can be separated from the metal parts, grinded, and then perhaps converted to a 3D printing material or a filament or pellet used for 3D printing. What this does is it allows us to analyze the life cycle analysis of some of these plastics, not only in production, but also in recycling. And various classes of these plastics have performance that are equivalent to the right coefficient of thermal expansion, melt flow indexes for printing. So for example, plastic bottles derived from packaging, milk packaging, you can grind this, you can make filaments, recycled filaments, you can 3D print them and give another life to what would have been a waste material. Now, the term upcycling, and I will not bore you with a lot of chemistry here because the point is to define upcycling, is basically taking old plastic, recycled plastic, and then converting it into either a compatibilizer or a vitrimeric material or a chemical additive or precursor to higher order plastics or higher performance plastics. We do this by catalytic reformation, construction or deconstruction, or even using this as an additive in mixed plastics of polyethylene and polypropylene. So as I said, I'm not going to show you chemical structures here, except that upcycling means you are deriving from a low value recycled mixed plastics and using it for high value industries. Take the case of rubber. Rubber is actually part of the polymer family. It's called a thermoset elastomer. A lot of rubber tires are usually just grinded, disposed. In fact, the biggest use of rubber tires is with the cement industry. They are burned to produce enough heat for the manufacturing of cement. Yet a lot of these rubber tires can actually have another life as a 3D printed material. And in fact, we have been looking at recycling or upcycling rather rubber, using it for 3D printing of parts that are elastomeric with a combination of binders. Another area that we look at is in the form of nanomaterials. Nanomaterials can be derived from metals, polymers, metal oxide sources, or even fibers or cellulose nanofibers. And in fact, this is a big program in my lab from CASE and at UT as well. So take the case of Abaca. Abaca is actually a big industry in the Philippines. We've been successful in derivatizing, obtaining nanocellulose nanowhiskers. We use this because they are high value additives for thermosets and thermoset elastomers in 3D printing. So one of the papers we produced then as part of Balik Scientist program, as well as the training that some of the students came here at Case Western at that time, was to use nanocellulose derived from Abaca and use it for 3D printing. So we would add this formulation on a plastic resin, and we would use a technique called stereolithographic apparatus to produce this nanocellulose formulation. The result is these nanowhiskers, as you can see here, reinforce the tensile strength, or basically the thermomechanical properties of plastic to produce parts that can be used for the human body, so prosthesis or even orthesis devices. Okay, take the case of shrimp. Okay, so we love to eat shrimp, different sources from cuttlefish to crab. Shrimp is basically the peeling is waste, okay? But actually it's rich in a material called chitin, which is converted to chitosan. So this was a paper that we published. Chitin can be derivatized and then converted into an additive by mixing with a surfactant. The result is we can gain a lot in terms of the thermomechanical properties by adding up to 8% of the surfactant modified chitin or chitosan to produce various parts that are useful for the industry. And as you can see here, this thermomechanical improvement was a function of loading of the chitosan material. So with my remaining time, let me summarize some of my Philippine engagement. We are all for Industry 4.0. So I hope the Philippines leapfrogs a lot of our neighboring countries to become the center of innovation in our region. And after all, taking our resource, which is really human resource, mostly, community relationship through good LGUs and government, and bringing the technology together, we are able to make the Philippines central in a lot of this ecosystem for sustainable growth and technology development. So as a chemist and chemical engineer, we have looked at technology as a way of investigating fundamental properties, but also this is a way to translate this to industry. So when you try to solve industry problems, that's when you discover a lot of solutions that come from fundamental science. The way I've contributed to our economy really is by training a lot of Filipinos. And through the years, in fact, this was a picture taken 10 years ago, I've been training a lot of Filipino PhDs. A number of them have gone home, some have stayed in the US, but it's my passion to see more Filipinos get into the science and engineering disciplines. So at Case Western, for example, I partnered with DOST, and this was a program that CP helped build at that time, which then I continued on my move to University of Tennessee and Oak Ridge National Lab. So at that time, we trained a lot of chemists, engineers who have since started careers, companies. I did a lot of work not only for DOST, but with PhilDev. Visited the Philippines a lot, brought students to look at 3D printing even in local high schools. And as a result, we got Kokoy. Kokoy led a lot of things in terms of establishing his own 3D printing center in partnership with DOST and Bataan Peninsula State University. 2 years ago, we inaugurated the groundbreaking ceremony of AMSEN. I'm sure you will hear more about this. My relationship with them, I started with the training as well as advising the leadership. I'm not going to show you the actual picture since it's yet to be inaugurated, but you will see it soon when you visit DOS in Bigoda. It's fully operational and it has a lot of this equipment. Now, I'm not going to show you all these facts here except to highlight that AMSEN really is a partnership run by PShared between ITDI and MIRDC. And even despite the pandemic, they've managed to continue and flourish with the training and industrial engagement. In fact, one of their big accomplishments very early on with the pandemic is get into the meat of helping the country with the COVID pandemic, both led by Bob Deason, Dr. Briones, Fred, Lisa, and Dr. Basilia in this engagement. And many other projects coming in the pipeline. I would say the biggest contribution of 3D printing will be in advancing manufacturing, from low to high technology, from parts to molding to specialized parts, to high complexity, high value added parts, tools, and therefore it can help generate a lot of high technology jobs to support manufacturing, from the automotive industry to aerospace and defense manufacturing. So at Oak Ridge National Lab, which is my other affiliation, we have the biggest demonstration facility, MDF, to which the AMSEN was actually patterned at the time. And hopefully we can continue this engagement. As you can see here, some of these 3D printing machines are as big as rooms and can 3D print engine parts, boats, and construction systems. And here you can see an actual Jeep that was printed within that facility. So I'm almost done. I'm just going to highlight the impact of additive manufacturing, the impact of plastic ecosystem and sustainability in many industries, including healthcare and devices, high value adding and defense industries, use of rapid prototyping, distribution, and so on. So in summary, I would say that plastic is a big problem, yet it's a big potential. It goes well with 3D printing. Let's extend this effort towards high performance or high value added goods. It will impact manufacturing. Let's link up with investments, investors, initiatives from the government, and of course, what we have the theme today, Bataan could lead the example. So with that, I'd like to thank you all.
Thanks, Gobet, for that presentation, as well as for all the work that you've been doing with DOST and the local institutions that we have here. So yeah, I remember in 2016, we started to talk about a program to start sending out Filipino students to your laboratories. I remember it wasn't that big budget. But fast forward to today, I believe we are still continuing with the project. And Kokoy was, I believe, the third batch to go there. And it's worth to mention also that in the first batch, we have one scientist who now has his own startup company doing polymer manufacturing. No? So lots and lots of exciting things that came out of that program. You also mentioned a little bit about plastics, no? And now we'll talk more about plastics in terms of its utility and disposal, um, and which should be an issue that we need to talk about more so for developing provinces like Bataan, which in the near future will have to contend with not only an increase in population but an increase in solid waste as well. Our last and certainly not the least of our speakers is Fabian Dairit. Toby is Professor Emeritus of the Ateneo de Manila University, an academician, Vice President of NAST, Chair of the Mathematical and Physical Science Division of NAST, former President also of PAASE. Like Gobet, Toby has a kilometer-long list of accomplishments, which I don't need to mention anymore because everyone knows Toby. And so without much further ado, please welcome Dr. Toby Dairit. Floor is yours, Toby. Toby? We can see your slides, but we can't hear you. You're muted.
Yeah, sorry. I unmuted because the garbage truck was just passing by when you were introducing me.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, the garbage trucks passed. So yeah, thanks for the to Giselle for putting this together, and thank you to all the speakers who came before me, and of course thanks to Gobet. I'm sure Gobet's CV is longer than mine. Actually, Gobet and I go a long way even when we were printing the newsletter for the ICP. I don't know if his printing press is still operating. So what I'm going to talk about here is more conceptual, and actually Gobet's presentation will probably fit in quite well here. So I've entitled my talk Plastics by Design, whether it should be circular, which Gobet talked about, or natural. And I guess the first comment is we're really not winning the war on plastic waste. So I'll talk about plastic waste, and in particular, single-use plastic. So I think we have to realize that most plastics were not designed for recycling. So here you have the list of thermoplastics, which are supposed to be recyclable if you believe their logo, and you have the thermosets, which are not recyclable. Now, among the thermoplastics, you have this category called other, which is really means you really can't recycle the other because you don't know what it is. But among the thermoplastics, the ones that are really recyclable are really just at most 3 of them: PET, high density polyethylene, and polypropylene. The other thermoplastics on that list, although they claim to be recyclable, are very difficult to recycle. In particular, you have the low density polyethylene, which makes up a lot of our bags, and even the linear low density polyethylene, which is even more difficult to gather as waste and to recycle. So, and it's important to note that the Philippines has not adopted a recycling designation. So if you see a designation like that, they're imported. But if they're from the Philippines, it's not required to put these logos. Now, most plastics were not designed for recycling. Here we have the list of additives, which have to be added to polymers to give them the functionality that we need. You have plasticizers, you have photochemical and fire retardants, antioxidants, free radical scavengers, anti-UV, etc. And some of them, or actually most of them, if not all, are fairly toxic. You even have metal stabilizers, which include cadmium and lead. what's interesting to note is that plastics are the only major industrial product that does not require disclosure of content. So in fact, this is one of my worries about just recycling plastic, is that you don't know really what's in them. So let's say you take PVC and try to recycle it. You don't know what additives were put in them because they were not declared in the first place. So this is one of the issues that we have to deal with. So now let's focus on single-use plastics, and definitely single-use plastics were not designed for recycling. Single-use plastics are designed to be lightweight and thin materials. The use of weight as a measure of their environmental impact is really inadequate. We normally measure them by weight, how many kilograms of plastic are produced, but the weight is not meaningful for many of these because they're really lightweight and they're very thin materials. So what's more important here is the surface area. So you could have a 1 gram of plastic of a linear low density polyethylene, and the area could be so many meters, square meters. So a very large surface area per unit mass is not really means that just using weight is an inadequate description of their difficulty or environmental impact. And here I mentioned LDPE, that's low density polyethylene, linear low density polyethylene, and polystyrene. And of course, when you recycle them, you cannot recycle them for food use. And many plastics, as I've already mentioned, have additives that make them difficult or harmful to recycle. Of course, PET has the waste as the highest value and recyclability. Now, this is an article written by some Chinese. So this mainly refers to the situation in China, which probably is the biggest plastic manufacturer now, although they took data from other areas as well. They estimate that single-use plastics, whether packaging and other uses, is about half, 50% of the plastic that's made. And as Gobet, accurately mentioned, this really bound to increase. And globally, there have been several government initiatives to try to limit minimize the use of single-use plastic, and their success is, I guess, needs to be assessed. But from the amount of waste that you see, you can tell that the success has been limited. So single-use plastic accounts for about 50% of total plastic production by weight, not by area. It is currently the most problematic type of plastic pollution. So for now, we can focus on single-use plastic. Because single-use plastic products have different degrees of replaceability, single-use plastic products are difficult to classify and to regulate. This is actually one of the issues in the congressional hearings, that you cannot treat all single-use plastic as one group, especially during the pandemic. Excuse me, you can't ban the face masks, which are single-use. And then because single-use plastics are designed for disposal, recycling is not economic. And the responsibility for plastic waste has been mainly passed to the consumer and the government, in particular the LGUs. However, primary responsibility must be assigned to the producer. So clearly, we cannot solve the problem of single-use plastic waste using the 3 Rs. So this logo is really very difficult to apply to single-use plastic waste. So we really need another strategy or concept to address the problem of single-use plastic. Now, this is a very recent article that came out. As you can see, it's, I think, just a few weeks ago. This is different from the other article, which is more famous, the one that ranked the Philippines as number 3. In fact, here, the Philippines is number 1. And the previous article looked at microplastics. This one looks at macroplastics. So they measured plastics which are visible. And actually, I wrote to this author already, and because they said they looked at 1,000 rivers. And they said the Philippines was number 1. In fact, this is the data they presented. And as you can see, there are 10 10 of the top 15 rivers are from the Philippines. So I asked them, did you look at all 1,000 rivers and, so that you can rank them? And the author hasn't answered me. But regardless, it's clear that we do have problem with this the macroplastic. Now, incineration, as you mentioned, as a possible solution. Now, this recent article is incineration the terminator of plastics and microplastics. So from the abstract, it says, it is widely accepted that incineration can permanently eliminate plastic waste. Our observations provide empirical evidence proving that incineration is not the terminator of plastic waste, and bottom ash is a potential source of microplastics released into the environment. So, of course, if you incinerate, you probably produce less microplastics, but you cannot assume or claim that incineration will solve the problem of microplastics. So we have the question, are microplastics the ultimate fate of all plastics? And we can discuss this further, but it's certainly a important question to address. And plastic waste will contribute to global warming. Incineration and waste to energy really also produces CO2 emissions. And since I think the goal is to really limit combustion, using combustion as a form of energy source, then incineration then becomes like a back road, a back road to convert petroleum into energy. And of course, you have the macro go into micro and nanoplastics, which I think is inevitable. And this impacts on terrestrial and marine ecosystems as well as human health. There was a recent article that they found microplastics in placenta in babies. So we come to the question, plastics, should it be circular or natural? Now, if you look at the chemical structures of synthetic polymers, these would be typical. The repeating units from petroleum products, and you have PET, polyethylene terephthalate, high-density polyethylene, polyvinyl chloride, and so forth. They have this general repeating units. Now, on the other hand, you have biopolymers, which Robert mentioned, and you can obtain them from agri-waste, from bamboo, coconut products, the coir, coconut fiber, seaweeds. Some are obtained by fermentation and other means. And what I'd like to propose is that we put a line between them. We don't mix them. So either we make synthetic polymers or biopolymers. And since we're talking about circular economy, the polymeric, the raw materials coming from petroleum can enter into the circular economy, manufacturing, consumption, use, and recycling. So it just really goes around in that system. While the biomaterials would enter a different system. So you have agro-based feedstocks, lignocellulosic feedstocks, organic waste feedstocks, and the waste can go into a separate bio-waste stream, organic waste feedstock. Maybe some of them can be fermented for whatever, even for bioenergy and other uses, and to avoid microplastics because their unit composition is really biodegradable. So on the left, we avoid or we don't encourage incineration or waste to energy. And the disposable plastics can be made out of the biopolymers, that's single-use plastic or even multiple-use plastic. And so you can more safely dispose these biomaterials, and maybe some of them can go back into organic waste feedstocks. So this is the basic concept that I would like to propose. Now, of course, this will require a lot of R&D, but we have to establish separate classifications and standards for circular plastics and bioplastics. So these would be some suggested things we have to do for circular plastics. We need to have standards for circular plastics, have extended producer responsibility, require declaration of plastic composition so that when you recycle, you know what's in them. Of course, life cycle assessment. Of course, lots of R&D. And R&D also on utilization of existing plastic waste. And on the other hand, you have the bioplastics. We also need standards for bioplastics and biodegradation, also extended producer responsibility, declaration of bioplastic composition, develop sustainable bioplastic sources, develop bioplastic waste management stream, life cycle assessment, and of course, R&D. And time frames probably be 10 to 15 years. Unfortunately, Congress thinks it can be done in 2 years or 1 year, which I think is not really reasonable. So I think that's the what I'd like to share with you. And so the question is, can we win the war on plastic waste? And hopefully we can develop new concepts so that we can win this war. So thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Toby, for that. Indeed, it's medyo malalim na discussion tong plastics, no? Because you will have to have the interplay of industries utilizing plastics and keeping the cost down, obviously. And if we start putting in regulations on plastic, then chances are they will just be putting this on top of the cost for plastic use, no? And so the consumers will definitely bear the cost on plastics, no? Dami kong tatanong sa'yo, but I'll open the floor first to our audience if there are questions. No, I see in the chat box a lot of networking happening, but we are now opening the floor for questions. You can either put it in the chat box for me to read, or maybe raise your hand. Okay, so we have a couple of people raising their hands. Let's start with Dr. Al Serafica. Al, you have the floor.
Thank you, CP. I mean, I'm very excited about this session this time because it has the ingredients of an LGU, a user, the scientist, which is us, and the government is the DOST group, especially Kokoy. I've been wanting to form a team around 3D printing, which Gobet has been really aggressively pushing for the last 10 years, as far as I could remember. Definitely, I have yet to be able to help out. I'm in technology transfer and forming teams how to commercialize together with industry. And I see here as a one viable option, indeed, for the government of Bataan, definitely looking at 3D printing using cement. My wife's family is FINMA. Phil Cement has a facility already in Mariveles, putting it in, and it's just a matter of adding Govet's equipment from Oak Ridge to bring in even the oldest 3D printing cement to demonstrate for housing needs of Bataan around the Mariveles area. And I'm more than happy and willing to be part of that team from the PAASE side, and definitely bring in the industry. And I think that's probably one of those ways we can operationalize some of these activities that we do. Is at the end of the day, we have to create the impact, and the only way we can do that is to be able to hit the ground running and create the models that really work. The same way Governor Abet has done it for Bataan in their ways of addressing health, education, and income generation. So I just wanted to offer my assistance.
That's good, Al. Yeah.
And of course, that will converge all the components with BPSU, with Kokoy, Gobet, and PAAS in the US, us here in the ground in the Philippines, and bringing in industry and the user need. It starts with the user need, and Governor Abet has clearly identified the user need today. Thank you for doing so.
You have to start that working group already and start communicating with Governor Abet.
So
thank you.
Can I add?
Go ahead, Governor Abet. Yes.
Yeah. Good thing you brought up, sir. Good morning. Good thing you brought up Phil Cement and FINMA. I mentioned earlier that we're starting the Port City development. It is a 500-hectare development in Mariveles. And we are currently talking with FINMA. They're very interested to put up the housing facility because they saw the potential and the need for it in that high opportunity, low risk area. So we're just finalizing. We have the master plan, but we're finalizing where the housing component would be built and the design, because I was pushing for the design to be a more of a higher elevation, so that we will have a smaller footprint. In other words, high density but well planned housing facility. And we had initial meetings with FINMA. In fact, the president of FINMA is a friend of mine, Felix.
As the Felix, yeah, on the FINMA property
Yes.
side. My
Yes.
father-in-law is Ramon Del Rosario, the
Oh,
chairman of
great,
the
great.
FINMA. So clearly, and they did FINMA properties, 4-story low-rise way back in the early 2000 for very inexpensive housing around the Quezon City and area. So they do have the expertise, but I think I want to inject the 3D printing capability that Gobet and Kokoy has really. We've seen this in all other countries. We need to have a subdivision here, as CP insisted, that it's 3D printed. And eto na yun. This is it.
Governor, we should just allocate an area for 3D printing. The technology already exists. So we just have to bring the machines and the know-how and print the first 3D printed village, housing village in Bataan. You can do it.
Yeah. Ang sarap talaga magplano, Gobet, ng mga ganitong projects, no? Al, if we have an LGU that is more than willing to be our guinea pig, kumbaga, but really the pioneers of what we envision. No? So I hope we can carry this on offline and start really planning what we can do on the ground. Tony, you were raising your hand.
Can I have an additional question?
Go ahead.
With regards, you're right, it's combining the FINMA and the 3D printing technology. Since we're talking about and envisioning a high density, well-planned vertical development, can the technology of 3D printing do it on a high level vertical development, or do we have a lot of limitations when it comes to that?
There are several situations, Governor. You can use immediately 3D printing for the existing construction industry by making the molds and prefabricated parts using 3D printing as molds. It can be done. It can accelerate the design process and production of prefabs for high rises.
Oh,
yes, the answer is yes.
Good to know. Good to know. And we have the full cement as the source of cement in Maribeles.
Mali yung ginamit kong term, Governor Abet, and Tito Aliga corrected me. We should have Bataan be the proof of concept, for these high-tech. I think it's about time that we explore these alternative manufacturing processes, and if Bataan will be our partner in this, then perfect. Okay, I'd like to. Yes.
Sabi Gov Abet kanina, both proof of concept, and he also used the word, also said guinea pig.
Para mas maganda yung sinabi ni Tito na proof of concept.
Civil engineering, si Tito.
Alam mo naman, we can do all these proof of concept in the laboratory, but it's definitely different when we do it in the real world. Okay.
DOST has identified construction as a primary target for 3D printing. Right. So you have a lot of support from DOST as well.
Okay, Bataan is becoming our most favorite province na, kahit na galing tayo sa ibang probinsya.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, I'll give some time for Tony and then Sec Ernie. Yes, Tony.
Thank you, CP. I just wanted to kind of bring the perspective from the ground up. No, we have all of these discussions in terms of the science and technology that's available, and what Toby was in fact pointing out, and how we need to segregate, the circular economy and what is going to be fed by the bio waste stream. I just wonder whether we can come up with some guidelines to help the province to translate practices at the community level, at the barangay level, that will facilitate now these transitions towards contributions to the circular economy, and then the contributions to the biostream fed one, so that there are practical implications almost immediately. And since local governance is in fact the specialty of Governor Abbott, those guidelines can be in fact translated into policy and practice almost immediately. So that's where I'm looking at. I'm coming from the ground up. Is there a way
Yeah,
for
perfect.
Yeah.
I'll ask Governor Abet, ano bang program natin for solid waste in Bataan?
Yeah. When it comes to solid waste, the province is the head of the provincial solid waste management board. So from the provincial level, we have a very competent environment office and officer. We manage the municipal environment offices when it comes to creating the 10-year solid waste management plan, the implementation of which, but most of the collection and disposal happens in the municipal level. I mentioned earlier, or it was mentioned that we're very prolific in PPP, public-private partnership. So currently, one of our challenge is that we don't have a sanitary landfill, which is very important. That's why the LGUs under Bataan entails a lot of cost to have the sanitary landfill in Clark pick up the waste from Bataan going to Clark for lack of sanitary landfill. So one project we have in the final stages through the PPP department is to create a sanitary landfill, and we have a project in the final stages towards that. We are also looking at the waste to energy, so that it can be a combination of sanitary landfill and waste to energy. And of course, there are also proposals for incineration that our environment office is looking at.
Yeah, and also, Governor, yung reduction of the waste itself,
yeah,
may have to be in the program and not just in the disposal.
Yes, very interesting what Ma'am Tony mentioned. If we can have an initiative in the barangay level, which is again a solution, a problem and a solution in context, we can, after the pandemic, we can add that to the list of requirements and targets for our incentive program for the barangay. And if it can be specific and clear, and if they meet that target every month, they will be recognized and they will be incentivized together with the other targets in health, in peace and order, and in other major aspect of a healthy society. So if we can come up with something like that, something very simple that on the barangay level can be attained, but if you add it all up, it will have a high impact in the municipality and in the province.
Agree.
So very
Agreed.
very interesting what Ma'am Tony said, and it's very bite-sized, very manageable, very doable. Yeah.
And Gob, no, in behalf of our President Giselle Concepcion, I am volunteering the 400 plus strong scientists and engineers of PAASE to consult for Bataan whatever you need, no? Most probably there'd be an expert in PAASE. And the first expert I will volunteer is former NEDA Secretary Ernie Pernia.
Yes.
Sec Ernie, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Sec.
Yes, well, yeah, it's a pity. It's a pity, Governor Abbott, that the pandemic really, disrupted the plan for the Bataan Cavite Bridge. That was one of the, the really flagship project. And I was telling people that this is going to be like Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, because the setting of the sun will be at the background of the this Bataan Cavite Bridge. So I think we should, accelerate the processing and construction of that project. And to the extent that I can help, I will do my part. Anyway, regarding 3D printing, I think Abet and Kokoy can respond to this. China is known to be the manufacturing hub of the world. They make all kinds of things, and they export them to the US, to Europe, and everywhere else. In the Philippines, most of the things we buy from the stores, whether it's hardware or other products, they are made in China. So are you saying that they are using 3D printing to produce these products that they export? And if China can do it, then I think we should be able to do it, because it looks like if we have the kind of if you can be the advisor, Kokoy can also be the advisor, and Gobit can be the advisor, then we should really begin to be the leader in ASEAN in terms of 3D printing, because we are really far behind in terms of manufacturing.
I'll field your question to Gobet and Kokoy.
Yeah.
Gobet, what's happening in China in terms of manufacturing?
Well, they have definitely a lot of advances, and they are specialized now in high performance in machine production. They're producing the machines itself that produce the machines. So in other words, they're really a big competition to Europe as well as the US. But as far as 3D printing, Secretary Ernie, that was the purpose behind AMCEN, which we started 3 years ago, was to leapfrog our neighbors into digital manufacturing. So I believe we're only second to Singapore in terms of advances in 3D printing in the country. So that big investment by DOST, where they will inaugurate the center in 2 weeks, is really a plan that started 5 years ago with Yusek Geb and Secretary Boy de la Peña. So with that investment, we are really poised to grow the ecosystem. We just have to take advantage of it now. I always believe in bringing the best to our country, best machines, best technologies. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just have to adapt. And this is actually what you said about China. China just copied, and flattery is the best form of, trying to emulate advanced countries. So yes, Secretary Pernia, we will implement high-tech manufacturing in the Philippines, starting with digital manufacturing.
And Gobet, we should also mention to Sec Pernia and everybody that although it might be a tall order for us to be competing against China in terms of developing machineries and equipment that will do the 3D printing, there is still a lot of research that can be done in terms of the material that we are 3D printing, and that in that aspect we can be competitive. In terms of materials that we will produce through 3D printing for various specific purposes, I think this is where we can be super competitive.
Exactly. I'm glad you mentioned, CP, about materials. And me being actually a material scientist, we have a lot to offer the Philippines, talent and also natural resources. So one of the things that they want to do now with AMCEN and many universities in the Philippines is to look at agro waste, fiber industries. And what Toby is pointing at is looking at mixed plastic, waste plastics, and using it for manufacturing. Of course, we always try to address what the industries want, which is high value, high performance, right cost performance ratio. So I think materials development, we are yet to shine, and we can have a lot of contribution from our universities, top scientists. And again, I'm willing to train people just to equip our universities the ability to innovate and produce new
And
materials.
yeah, speaking of universities, Kokoy, did you want to add something from
Yeah,
what
yes,
Gov-
sir, CP, yes, sir. Thank you. For the question by Secretary Pernia, China is using conventional manufacturing like injection molding and sand casting to produce hundreds or thousands or even millions of pieces that are very cheap, kahit saan lang ipadala, no, yung mga products nila. But 3D printing gives us the power, anybody, anyone will have the power to create based on their needs whenever they need it. And for example, tsaka ano, they can do it in 1 or 2 days. But if you order from China, I think it would take a few weeks. For example, itong ginamit po namin sa hospital dito.
Oh, I
just
like that example,
yeah.
Kokoy, yung para
Yes.
sa hospital beds.
Yeah, hospital beds. I got the sample from the hospital. I visited the hospital during a pandemic, measured the dimensions, and then made a CAD model of that. And then after 1 or 2 days, we tested if they fit. And then after one more iteration, the beds are working now. And that's the first thing is conventional manufacturing. We can compete by customization or bespoke design for each need. And the second one would be we have materials here that we can explore. Like for construction, we can 3D print maybe bio ash or fly ash from GN Power, from Petron, and from the paper mills here. We can use lahar from Pampanga and other materials. And the third one, BPSU has been famous in skills training, like technology training for example, sand casting or foundry. We have a machine shop, we have welding shop. We have a proposal to DOST to combine traditional processes like injection molding or combine sand casting, those traditional processes with 3D printing. We will 3D print molds, and then the benefit, the furniture industry in the region will benefit from that, what we call the hybrid manufacturing. It's we're trying to start a hybrid manufacturing unit, combining these manufacturing processes to be able to be more competitive locally and sa Bataan, sa region and in the Philippines.
Sounds good, Kokoy. No, keep up the good work.
Yes, if I
Yes,
may add just briefly,
sige,
I
and then
actually had
Giselle.
a vision which I communicated 2 years ago, which is a 3D printer for every barangay. So imagine Governor Abbott, Gov, can you have a 3D printer for every barangay in Bataan? I'm very sure you'll have many uses. And one of the things that 3D printing does is it's good in making parts for repairing old equipment.
Yeah.
And this is yet an industry that is to be unlocked because there's a lot of old equipment that are missing parts, either imported or they're no longer manufactured. And 3D printing can manufacture and repair those parts. Just like
I was thinking, Gobet, yung mga agricultural machinery.
correct.
Na pag may nasirang maliit na part, we just have to dispose of that.
Correct.
Instead of repairing it. That's a good example. Yes, Giselle, you wanted to say something.
Yes, I wanted to tell Gov Abet that we would like to focus on agricultural productivity as a way to solve the poverty and hunger problem in Bataan and all over the country. Sec Ernie and I and Gobet and many of us who have been members of PASE for 20 years or so, we have this advocacy to champion infrastructure. Now we see that the DOST and GOBET are setting up the AMSEN. It's a centralized office. Equipment is expensive, but then you have the experts telling us that it is critical. CP had a major role in AMSEN. Then we have our infrastructure building up in BPSU. Now the other important factor is the superstructure. So this is a word we coined and we love using it. And I have this mantra of infra, supra, where the superstructure is really the expert human capital that's critical and really lacking in our country. So to have Kokoy as a clone, as an alter ego of Gobet in Bataan is a major, major asset, a valuable person that you have there that you should make good use of. And he can help determine what infrastructure you would need to invest in Bataan to create what we call the value chain, from research, from academics to research to impact on small and medium-sized industries to big industry. Let us in particular focus on co-ops where there are agricultural equipment that were given during the time of your father, probably during the Pinoy administration. And I understand some of them are not being used properly and people do not know how to use them. So I think there has to be this kind of training on that level. Okay, now comes the other players who are actually represented here today. So we have the DOST, we have Academe, we have the provincial government, LGUs, but we also have the private sector. If I may, I would like to give Celia Teves of Sinagtala Duyan a chance to speak on how we can have an integrated development showcased, say, in an industry that is growing rapidly in Bataan, that is the ecotourism industry. Okay, you're addressing education, infrastructure, etc. Celia, are you there?
I'll call on Celia.
Yes.
But you mentioned something super important. But I'll know, before Celia, I'll call on Toby first. And that is, yes, we have the manpower, manpower complement in Bataan, which you mentioned, no, through BPSU.
Yes.
But don't forget that Bataan has so much natural resources. The west side for fisheries,
right.
Our upland farms in Natib and Maribeles.
Resources is the basis of ecotourism.
Yes, and if you go to our place in Sinagtala, you will find out it's like Baguio weather. So they grow coffee there and upland vegetables.
Yeah.
Yes.
Coffee, yeah.
So I'll call on Celia, but I'll give the floor first to Toby.
I meant to say Toby has to. We have to address the concerns of Toby in Sinagtala. CP, you can do that.
Yeah. Thanks, CP. Actually, I want to follow up on Govet's idea kasi it's actually very good. Ang dapat gawin ni Gov, magpapa-contest siya. If a certain region can produce so many engineers and computer scientists, etc., people who can actually run a 3D printer. Parang ito yung premyo nyo, bibigyan kayo ng 3D printer, gawa kayo ng pag-negosyo nyo. So you can actually maybe attract OFWs, a lot of engineers might come in.
I like the idea, Toby.
Magtatrabaho. So actually, magandang
ko ng idea yan, Steve and Toby. Yung mga expert OFWs, X% of every region, i-attract nyo Gov Abet. Ang laki ng impact niyan.
I love the idea, and that buti na lang the regional director for DOST, JC Sikat, is also with us, so we should partner with them with that idea.
Yeah,
pero implement yan.
Ang maganda doon, then you're gonna encourage more people to take engineering. Kasi malaman, ito palang may negosyo pala, you can earn a living. That I guess is the first point I want to just to follow up, support Govet's idea. My second idea is that if we're gonna develop bioplastics, we have to do it. We don't wait for the West kasi nandito yung resources. The West will always develop plastics from petroleum. Ngayon, okay lang naman basta circular plastics sila, okay lang. But kasi they have to make use of their resources. We have the resources for bioplastics, so we have to lead in that. So I think if we're gonna prioritize research on polymer research, bioplastics ang ating puntahan. And the third is our current waste is really a problem. I don't have a solution to that. So I think tignan na natin yung gagamitin sa kalye. Maraming mga suggestions na yan We look into those so that we can solve our current waste problem. Because frankly, I don't have a good solution for our current waste problem. But so we have to do both current waste as well as
future plastics. So yun lang ang aking ano. Sige, salamat.
No, when you were speaking, Toby, I'm reminded of waste materials coming from copra manufacturing and also waste materials from the abaca industry. And these are all very viable materials for as an additive to 3D printing materials.
CP,
Yes.
you have to recognize the presence of former congressman and the SBTA chair, Payumo.
Is Sir
joined
Tom
us.
here? Okay.
He has
Also
joined us.
a neighbor of ours in Sinagtala, and the
Thank you
prime
so much for
mover of
joining.
Sinagtala. Hi, Chairman Payumo.
Yes.
But I'll call on Celia. Are you still there? Or Chairman Payumo, if you want to say something about that's related to our discussion. Celia.
Celia's there. Celia.
Okay, while waiting for there. You're muted,
Please
Celia.
unmute.
Jaisal.
Yes.
Thank you for this wonderful presentation. You're giving us all work to do, which is good. Here in Sinagtala, we've been closed for almost a year, and but what we're trying to do right now is doing everything ecological. I mean, we're trying to do composting the natural way. Tom Payumo's daughter, Lexi Payumo, is also doing waste control. So with Abbott at our command, I think we can do a lot of things here. And we can be your guinea pig, as you say, the LGU as your guinea pig.
Sounds good. And in fact, ang naisip ko, Celia, when tourism is already completely open and everyone's vaccinated, we should host like a scientific meeting in Sinagtala.
Fantastic.
Together with Governor Abbott.
I already that floor has been open to Jaisal for many years ago.
Okay.
Well, remember CP, if last year for our 40th anniversary, we did not have the COVID, we would have gone on this Balik Kasabayan Mo Tayo Na program. Our ecotourism R&D, research and recreation. And we would have hosted groups of 10 PAASA members and friends to go to the provinces, and Sinagtala was going to be one of them.
Okay, open invite to PAASA and everybody to come to Sinagtala.
Come together talaga, minds coming together.
And do some R&R at the same time.
Minds and hearts coming together.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, we only have like a couple of minutes left before we close our webinar, but before we do, maraming salamat everybody for attending our webinar. This is an eye-opener definitely for myself. And this intersection of governance and science is something that's really worth pursuing and exploring further. Final words, maybe quick word from RDJC, you want to say something? Ano ba, may support ba kami from DOST with all the ideas of projects that came out?
Definitely, Sir CP, and to all the PAASA members, and of course to Gov, makaasa po kayo ng suporta ng DOST. In fact, Secretary De La Peña messaged me early this morning to really make sure that I would be present in this discussion, because we really have to provide the necessary environment with which we could work together towards pushing Bataan to what it wants to be. In fact, the DOST had been consistently assisting the entire Bataan, the province, the municipalities, of course, the Balanga City. Ay napakarami pong proyekto ng DOST dyan, at of course yung ating capability build na ginagawa sa kanila in terms of establishment of in helping them establish the Philippine the Science High School in Bataan, and of course yung ating metrology, itong ating additive manufacturing. Ang dami po nating proyekto diyan na lahat po ay ina-aim natin na ma-push talaga na ang Bataan would be the next smart city no?
Yeah.
And
RD
we
yung
could
rail.
do this.
Kasama yung rail.
And with all,
Yeah, the rail.
yeah, yes po, of course, yung ating railway engineering na talagang diretso na po yan. Even sa pagpupo po sa board ng BPSU ay palagi po namin pinapriority ang GOV. At tayo po ay makakaasa po ng tulong, hindi lang po sa regional office ng DOST, but of course, from the office of the secretary, committed po tayo.
Alam mo, RDJC,
yes.
malapit na tayong ma-accuse ng favoritism dito sa Bataan. And of course, although Sec Boy is from Bulacan, the wife of Sec Boy is from Balanga. So,
Correct po. At hindi ko na nga minention yun pero madalas may pinupuntahan kami ni Sec Boy dyan sa Balanga. But totoo po yun na ang puso po ni Sec Boy ay nasa Bataan at kayo po ay makakaasa na ang DOST Regional Office din po ay tutulong. Lahat po na within our means ay nakasuporta po kami in this endeavor, especially special thanks po sa PAASE because of course your technical expertise, your guidance will be very critical in attaining what we want to be. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, RDJC. Final words from Giselle before we close our webinar.
CP, wala tayong magagawa. Talagang maraming magagaling galing sa Bataan, Banson family, etc. Maraming magagaling talaga, di ba? So anyway, I think one important thing that Gov Abet mentioned is PPP. It shows us today how much DOST and the government has already invested, diba, in science and technology and development. Ngayon, you have the opportunity, Gov Abet, to get the private sector to co-invest. Kasi hindi naman kaya na lahat gobyerno. And because you are still very closely linked to Congress, maybe to pass legislation, how about let's try to get a private-public partnership 1:1 or 6:4 between the private sector and the government to push science and technology-based development. Yun po sa Singapore ang ginagawa. Sec Ernie and I are aware of the biotech development program of Singapore from way back. Siyempre, meron namang minimum. Meron mga ilang milyones ang i-invest to qualify for that. No? Pero I think the private sector is a major player in development. And that is why the PAASE and NRC, we are committed to getting the private sector involved. The other final thing, CP, is the OFWs.
Yeah.
And that's my personal advocacy. Every province, every region has an X% of OFWs who are experts or competent people in the medical field, in the engineering field, and of course in the tourism industry. So why don't you try to attract some of them to become your experts in the country, even in the railway system, in the transportation and ICT system? Ang daming Pilipino abroad, hindi lahat PhDs. Engineers whom you can attract.
But you mentioned something very important, and that is the participation of the private sector in investment.
Absolutely.
And I wanted to call, just before we close, Giselle, I wanted to call on Chairman Tong Payumo, who has done a lot of investments in Bataan. Baka ito na yung first investment nating hinihintay other than FINMA through Al Serapica. Chairman Tong, are you there?
Yeah, Chairman Tong.
Hi, yes, I've been listening.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, well, I'm very informal here right now. I'm at home and I'm glad I'm listening into the topics that you are discussing. There are two things there. One is the use or probably substitute for plastic packages, and in Sinagtala we prefer to give discount to those who use paper packages or containers rather than plastic. Of course we cannot ban, but we can give discount so that they will prefer to just use the biodegradable packages. The other big thing I would like to probably mention now is I think Governor Abet has knows of this, is we've been talking about connecting Cavite to Bataan via a bridge. And I think the distance is very, very short without having to pass through SLEX, Metro Manila, NLEX, and SETEX. From Naik to Mariveles, just, I don't know, 30 kilometers or so. And then you have the Roman Highway, Bataan Highway, all directly to Dinalupihan, I think. And there's even another route to Bagak and Morong. No? So I think that will greatly ease the clogging of the traffic in Metro Manila, in Skyway and the NLEX as well. So these are the advocacies that I am doing. And I think finally, I heard President Duterte said, "Oy, approve na yan," and so on. They've signed already the design contract. So construction will probably take, I don't know, 5 years, but you know, before we know it, 5 years is over, we have that bridge. That is something very good.
They can do it with a 3D printer.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
CP,
And,
Tony,
yeah.
Tony should speak. Our big boss, Tony, Ma'am Tony.
Tony, are you there?
Yes.
Final words?
Thank you, Giselle. Thank you, CP. I wanted to thank you both also for this opportunity to make the connection. No? Governor Abet, I think for you all has been a revelation, but the people of Bataan have really appreciated the kind of leadership he's exhibited all these years now as their governor. And I'm hoping that we can really build some kind of institutional framework around what is being discussed today in terms of the contribution to Bataan's what we call evidence-informed risk governance for resilience and sustainable development for Bataan. NRC is happy to work on this with you, and I wish to say hello to Sec Pernia, who was introduced to me by Ambassador Romulo, who's the convener of NRC. So thank you very much again for making us a part of this discussion. Salamat.
Salamat, Tony, and thanks also for all the work of NRC in bridging the science to the governance sphere. And hopefully you can tap more of the PAASE experts in the projects that NRC is doing. I'd also like to thank very much Governor Abet. Keep up the good work, Governor Abet. I actually had one maybe politically incorrect question to you, but I believe that you can do all these planning, and long-term visioning simply because, well, in reality, the Garcias have been in Bataan and at the helm of Bataan, and if there's no continuity in the leadership, then what we expect from our leaders would be short-term plans, and we stop there. So in a way, it's good that the Garcias have been there, and you are now doing that vision more so in the medium and long term. Although people will say, ano to, political dynasty and so on and so forth. But I guess that's an advantage if you have a proactive leader in future planning. So yun lang yung gusto kong sabihin at itanong kay Governor Abet, baka meron siyang ibang way of looking at it. Also, I'd like to thank Gobet, of course, and Kokoy and Toby. There's really definitely a lot of things that we can do, lalo na we have Bataan as our host. And hopefully our discussions do not end with this webinar, and we continue on building what we have talked about in this webinar in the future. So maraming salamat in behalf of Giselle and the rest of PAASE. Thank you, everyone. It's 11 a.m. and hope to see you again in our next webinars.
Meron pa tayong social scientist.
Oo nga. So we end our webinar Andiyan pa ba si Governor Abet?
Yes.
Yes.
Still
Yes.
there.
Yeah.
Oo, andyan.
Governor Abet, sorry to put you on the spot. Ano bang tingin mo sa political dynasty and future planning? Ano ba talaga ang solution dyan in terms of
Sabi nga nila, hindi raw political dynasty, political destiny raw. Joke. But kidding aside, no, this is one of my advocacy also. It shouldn't be your political career or your fate as a public servant shouldn't be based on your family name. It should be based on your performance. And performance should be measured. Ang problema natin sa Pilipinas, we don't have any measurement for performance. That's why personality-based o dynasty, masama. Yun palagi yung connotation. So just imagine if you do that in sports. Ang dami po ngayon sa NBA na second generation NBA players na magagaling. Pero what if you base it on personality and the family name? You would have denied the world of these talents. Same thing with public servants. Kung meron lang tayong measurements.
Yung ability for you to be able to plan 5 years beyond your term is definitely absent in areas that do not have that dynasty.
That's very true. That's very true. I mentioned earlier one of the places we benchmark regularly with is Singapore.
Yes.
Singapore, that's 40 or 50 years of People's Action Party pushing the direction. Continuity talaga. Continuity. Of course, you can say a lot of negative things, positive things about Singapore, but one thing that cannot be denied, there is continuity of the programs and projects. And
perhaps the one way of bridging dynasty and continuity would be in professionalizing our leadership, and therefore it's not anymore based on your last name, but based on your training, because you go through that pipeline. And then with that, siguro may continuity na magagawa.
Training and performance kailangan, because the people should feel the performance of the public servants.
That there is something happening.
There is something happening, and there should be clear metrics para hindi lang parang pakiramdaman.
Baka yung NRC, Tony, calling on Tony to develop like a KPI list for governance.
What we're starting to do here in Bataan, as I've mentioned earlier, when we went through the performance governance system, is to have a metric of performance, which is the HDI, or the measurement of the quality of life. So what if we standardize this all across all LGUs?
Yes.
Para this is what I've been advocating to DILG, to DOH, with the universal healthcare. And because of the Garcia Mandanas case, which was won in the Supreme Court, wherein a lot of the internal revenue allotment will be decentralized and put in the coffers of LGUs. So now they're looking for metrics. So I've been advocating something like this. If we can do it standardized across the board, then even the electorate, even the media and the social media and everyone, even the scientists, would be educated kung sino talaga magaling. Hindi dahil magaling magsalita, hindi dahil magaling kumanta tsaka sumayaw, pero metrics talaga. So, maaring isang chief executive.
I will actually quote you on that when I speak to the NRC webinar next week. I will include that in my
metrics
talk.
will speak for itself. And in our case, for the absence of a better measurement, HDI. So what if minimeasure natin yung HDI almost real time in all the LGUs? And we give incentives to the LGUs based on the HDI on a monthly basis.
Agree. You speak like a scientist, Gov.
Actually, si Prof. Ernie Garidao is the one we have to harness here, no? And And Prof actually has thought about these issues for a very long time. So si Ernie would be a great participant in this conversation, as Governor Abbott knows.
No, I was wondering if the quality of national governance impacts, or does it matter whether or not the quality of national governance is is bad or good for the local government.
It absolutely.
If Bataan can be governed correctly and progressively, regardless, whether or not the national government is doing well or not. Because that is the problem, I think. When the national government is not of a high quality, then it may have an impact on the local governments.
True.
But if it can be done, if local governments can do their job well, regardless of the quality of national governments, then that would be better.
Yeah, agree. And ako, I agree with what Toby said in the chat, that if HDI, our Human Development Index, if we can make it into a list and make it as a metric for governance quality, then that's the end goal of political leadership, I guess.
Correct.
Also,
Because
poverty
it encapsulates everything.
Yes,
even environment,
poverty.
quality of life, poverty, health.
Inequality, inequality, poverty.
Tony, pakigawa na yan, please.
Yeah.
Pero,
Ito, I was
CP,
just to make a simple simple example, I was telling the DILG, because they have this regular recognition dun sa Seal of Good Local Governance, where before the pandemic, every quarter or every year, we would meet. And yung mga nakakomply sa Seal of Good Local Governance are given recognition and a little cash incentive. Kaya lang, dun sa Seal of Good Local Governance, they're just indicators. So sabi ko sa DILG, what if yung bottom line, which is the HDI, bigyan natin ng target based on their previous historical record, yung bawat LGU, the 40,000 barangays, the 1,300, 400 municipalities, and the 180 cities, and the 81 provinces. What if ma-standardize natin yung HDI? Then every quarter or every month, we call them probably by region, tapos we give incentives or disincentives depending on their performance.
So, Gov Abet, I have
Transparency yan, Governor Abet.
Pero hindi rin lang yun eh. I think along the lines of our own advocacy in PASE, which is human capital development, of course, focused on science and technology. Yeah. Gov Abet, it goes without saying na active ang training ninyo. You can monitor performance, but then you must also invest in updated training of your manpower, diba? So we wrote a paper, a position paper. It's found in our website, GovAbet, on SNT Human Capital Development. We sent it to 10 congressmen and 10 senators. And right now, we're actually in the discussions with the speaker himself, the speaker's office. Okay, so I think importante yun, no?
We can send a copy to Governor Abbott.
Yeah.
I'd like to say a quick hello to the friend of everybody, Dr. Cora Claudio is still with.
Hi, Cora.
Yes, Tony, go ahead.
Can I comment on
Good morning.
HDI and
Cora.
Sec Pernia's point, no? On HDI, Gov, you're absolutely correct. There is no denominator on the Seal of Local Good Governance, no? So you have all of these indicators, but there's no denominator. So how can you say everybody's looking at apples to apples? No? So that's one.
Exactly.
So the second point, I think that Sec Pernia was making about national government either enhancing or hindering what local governments can do. I think very clearly what's happening, and unfortunately what's happening with COVID is a clear case. No, each of the different LGUs have different capacities. We understand that, but confusion and sometimes vagueness and sometimes the changing positions from the national level will deepen, okay, the impact of the lack of capacity in some of the LGUs to deal with this crisis. And so this national local linkage is very important. You hear it articulated very clearly. They will say, why are we allowing ROFs? Basically, we cannot manage this with this protocol, etc., etc. Pa-iba-iba yung guidelines at yung implementation. So, Gov, I'm saying the politically sensitive things here because we're not, in government, but the national local linkage is so important because let's take, for example, if Gov is not able to get support for that bridge, okay, at the end of the day, the vision for Bataan and what it can contribute to the national economy will never materialize. The COVID situation is a very clear indication of how confusion between national and local really is hitting local communities, because they're at the front line. And LCEs of the different LGUs have been articulating this very clearly. So I think that...
Tony, I just wanted to mention, because you said na, hirap naman i-implement yung HDI because we can compare apples to apples.
No.
And that's where we are good at, no? The scientists. We can normalize the data and do statistics and trends.
What I mean to say is it must be HDI because it will be apples to apples.
Agree.
It will be apples to apples. Yeah.
Correct.
The SGLG, pabago-bago rin yan eh. Kung sino ang sumusulat dyan sa DILG, yan ang lumalabas, as the indicator.
Pero magandang gawin yan nga, Tony.
One simple example I always give DILG just to explain my point. I give the example of sports. For example, basketball. When you go to a different country, the same rules apply. Kaya you will know sino yung pinakamagaling na basketball player dahil the same rules apply in the Philippines, in Europe, in the US. So standardized talaga siya. But for public service, especially in our country, hindi standardized. So hindi mo alam kung sino magaling. If that were the case in sports, you might be incentivizing the less talented athletes. Then how will you have a culture of meritocracy, and how will you have a culture of excellence? That's why in sports we have super athletes. That's why in public service we don't have super public servants. Pero it's possible. When I really thought about it, in Singapore we have super public servants. Kahit sino makausap namin doon ang talino, kahit sa bureaucracy, because they have a culture of meritocracy. And one major component in the culture of meritocracy is really standardizing these things. Otherwise, hindi mo malalaman kung sino magaling, paano mo i-reward or incentivize kung sino magaling. So this is crucial, just like in sports, just like in government. So sabi ko
rating for public servants.
Rating that is standardized across the board, apples to apples.
Yeah.
Sabi ko nga sa national government, you should start acting like a NBA commission. Tapos yung mga LGUs are the NBA franchises. So you set the rules, you set the target, you
nawala si
incentivize and
Abet, how about the idea of giving LGU executives a scorecard? In other words, the constituents in an LGU, the citizens there would be scoring the performance of the executives of the local government in terms of their performance. For example, the analogy here is professors. When we teach, we are scored, we are evaluated by our students, and it's effective because then professors are put on their toes in terms of teaching, timeliness, and so on. if why can't that be done for local governments?
Yes.
Executive
Yes.
local governments. Scorecard.
Agree.
Maybe
Agree.
every year or every 2 years. So that,
Pero
you
I
know,
think, Sec Ernie, it's culturally ayaw natin na kino-compare yung sarili natin sa iba. I think it's
Kaya nga may
cultural.
resistance pa rin yung ganyan sa UP.
Oo.
no,
Konti lang yung,
Right.
oh, please rate me. Yung ganon.
Pero Gov, science like sports, that's universal. The standards are the same all over the world. So governance is a science. So please get more of our scientists and engineers. There are 470 of us in PASE.
Yes.
They're
Yes.
willing to help, no? To
Thank
help
you.
you with all your, progressive projects. And then, objective ang mga criteria, no?
Yeah.
Bob, siguro we can do a matching, no? We can do a matching, given the needs and priorities of the province. NRC can help with identifying, and working with PAASE on trying to match the expertise that is available, no? Giselle, if that's okay with you,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let this be the model. Okay, yes.
Wonderful.
Incidentally, guys, we're just chatting. The webinar has ended. But, so if you drop off, it's fine because it's almost time to prepare for lunch. But it's really nice, Gov Abet, to be talking to you this morning.
Dr. Claudio wants to say something.
Oh, asa na si Cora.
And then I think Director Payuma still has something to say. I saw it in the chat. But anyway, sige, Cora.
Cora, if you're still there.
I'm texting some people. Bakit yung does not have chat to somebody? So my chat notes are going to everyone. No,
it's okay. It's okay.
I was typing something to Gobet. We're doing our new almost a few months lang, no, because we set it up, and some of you are with us already. Climate Crisis and Sustainable Development Committee, network. We are attending to bamboo, no. And I will contact also Governor Garcia because you may already have self-supporting bamboos in Bataan. And we are starting with bamboo for food because when Wasisi was alive, he was my occasional mentor. He would always tell me, Cora, focus on bamboo for food. Now we have bamboo for food from shoots. The ones in the market are canned shoots from China. So immediately we have a challenge to compete with what they offer, no? Because the local bamboo shoots that are in the market are very crudely packaged and they deteriorate after 2 days even when you refrigerate. So I'd like to talk with some of those who spoke here because we want to do this right and really address many needs of ours, including power generation with bamboo.
Sige, Cora, I'll give your email to Kokoy and everybody if that's okay.
Yeah, I already posted my number. No?
All right.
Okay. Ma'am, we have a bamboo development program in Bagak, Bataan. Maybe we can connect with, I can connect you with our program so that we can develop the bamboo industry here in the province. Thank you.
That's great. That's great.
Cora, that's nice. Labong. Bamboo shoots, labong.
The bamboo is an excellent material too for 3D printing, in particular the fiber. Even the waste fiber from the bamboo industry is very useful. So, Governor, I'll visit you in the Philippines when I'm there.
Yes, please. Yeah, we'll be looking forward to it. Thank you, sir.
That's amazing. Yeah. All right.
Okay, it's 11:20. Yung mga kailangan mag-prepare na ng lunch, yung magluluto pa. Now is the time. But thank you, everybody. This is
fantastic. Yeah.
It's really nice talking to, well, Governor Abet, of course, kasi hindi siya usually nandun sa circle of scientists, but hearing you talk, Governor, para kang para kang data scientist. No,
Exactly.
you do all your
Measurements.
decisions based on
Data.
evidence and data. No, which
Data
is,
analytics.
yeah. So maraming
No, no.
salamat.
Also, like Lee Kuan Yew, it only takes one good lineage. Good seed bears good fruit. So you learned it from your father, but you also were nurtured by him, educated by him, by being exposed to the good things that he had been doing. So it's both nurture and nature. Okay?
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
Okay.
So thank you everyone. Ito na talaga yung ending ng webinar natin.
Ayaw pa mag-end.
Thank you, God.
Hopefully,
Thank you.
hopefully in the near future we can have a face-to-face interaction na.
Yeah.
Medyo nakakapagod na rin mag-Zoom, but still better than not seeing everybody. Yeah, in Sinagtala.
Governor, today or for the next month, Celia Teves of Duyan is hosting GMA 7. I don't know how many they are. Are they 50 or 100 people? I can't recall now.
More than 100.
Amazing. Yan, oo. So, nag-uumpisa na.
I know. I'm there next week. So sabi nila maraming ang tao.
Grabe. Pero all the protocols are being followed, for COVID.
Yeah.
Lahat ginagawa ng tama. Okay, so
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
On
Thank
that
you,
note, let's
Pastor.
end this.
Thank you, Ma'am Tony.
Finally.
Thank you.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you po.
Prof Dison, we're proud of you. Salamat.
Governor, thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
Nandito po yung tatay ko, si kaibigan ni Gov, si Rolly Dison.
Ay, si Kuya
yeah.
Rolly.
Hi.
Pinagmanahan.
Dison.
Pinagmanahan talaga. We're proud of you. Thank you, Sec Pernia, RDC Cat. Thank you. And to the Paase community, maraming salamat po. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. I'll end it now. Thank
Okay,
you.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Toby, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Tobes, very, very important, your concept proposal. Very important, Toby. Yes.
Marami pang kayang gawin.
Oo, okay. Galing. Ganun talaga merong concept for implementation. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Sige, bye-bye. Sige, thanks.
Hey, everyone. Gobet, thank you so much.
Thank you,
Okay.
Giselle.
Thanks,
So
everyone.
glad to
Sige, see you, Gobet. Marami ko pang gagawin.
si Kokoy, grabe, critical.
Toby, I'll talk to you later.
Okay. Looks like chemists are so important, huh? Of course. Okay, bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, Kokoy, everybody.
Thank you po.